trees begin to moan, and the monsters grunt and groan, rotting faces full of slime. Don't you know it's terrifying? 'Cause it's terror again. They got you running through the night.
Well, that's a scary song. That is a scary song for All Hallows Eve. We know it's over. We know it's over. It's Thanksgiving time now. There will be, or there should be, a Thanksgiving special coming up. We tried to do the Halloween when a lot of shit got crazy. But let me just, before we kick off the show, say welcome. That was, as you may know, that was the great Alex Plox playing his musical stylings from the new Rob the Mod video game called Monarch. And let me put... well, I will put, you'll see his link coming up pretty soon in the chat. And then right after was Unrivaled with their album or EP Ghost Stories with Zombie Island rock cover Terror Time from the Scooby-Doos. So, Rob the Mod says, what's up with the dislikes? Well, you know, listen, let's be clear. Let's be fucking clear. We obviously have at least a month left dealing with these Metroid babies, which is fine. They come into every video and they dislike it, and that gives them a sense of power in their life. Think about that for a moment, though. Think about that for a moment. That is their crusade. And I know this because I've seen some of them online. I've talked to some of them in message boards. They literally think... Hang on. They literally think that they're getting something done. And I'm like, really? You guys don't want to go out and sign up voters for the upcoming election or something? You guys... Okay. But anyway, yeah, Rob, that's got to be what it is, I assume. But we will see. But don't worry, we're going to piss off Nintendo fans today and maybe even Soulsborne fans. I don't mean to. But as I told someone in the chat earlier, I'm not trying to kick a hornet's nest with this. I literally have proof that they should add... difficulty modes in the Souls games, in all games, right? And we'll talk about it. We'll debate it. We'll discuss it. Let's find out. Before we do that, I want to let Joshua Goucher know of the Cincinnati Gouchers. Thank you very much, sir, for your generosity. First super chat of the day coming in before we even started. I don't know if he's here anymore. But Joshua, thank you, pal. I appreciate it. And then John Weston has joined the Diet Soda Soldiers. He put on his big boy pants. He says, Mama, I'm going to war. She says, where are you going to war, Johnny Weston? He says, I'm going with the Diet Soda Soldiers wherever they take me. There's some dope. Tell your mama you're smoking some dope. And we're going to join the battle for all the... I don't fucking know what we fight for. It doesn't matter as long as we fight. Am I right, fellas? Hello, Andre. Hey, Jeffy. I love Metroid, and I love you, too. I'm thrilled, Andre, you love Metroid. We're not going to spend too much... I don't want to talk too much about Metroid today. All I want to just tell you is that it is staggering that people are still having an issue with it. Now, what's probably happening, you know, to their credit, to these sort of Metroid fan folks, is they're a little worried because they're, oh, good for you, Johnny. Johnny says he's high. They're a little worried because probably they're seeing the sales of Metroid, which are not, you know, it's not doing poorly, but it's not, you know, it's not flying off the shelves, the digital shelves. And understandably, it would be like, hey man, we want more Metroid. I want it to sell. I get that. I totally get that. But I'm not the bad guy. I didn't fucking make the game. But we're going to talk about Nintendo in a little bit, and are they headed for a cliff? Is the members only chat on? Yes, it should be members only this evening unless people are paying for it, or if they want to call in, they don't have to pay. Just like Jacob555 is in the waiting room. I'm going to bring him in a little bit. You can always talk for free, but there's various ways to do it. Why do you ask, Rob the Mod? Why are you curious about that? What do you need to know? You know what? Rob sent me... Rob's starting to lift up his dress a little bit. He's starting to show me his pantyhose. He sent me some footage of his new game, Monarch, today. One-man band is making this fucking thing, and it looks pretty fucking cool. I'm looking forward to seeing a trailer when he's ready. But think about that. Think about how you can make a game now with one person. You can make a game that sells a shit ton with one fucking... The guys who made and the ladies who made Unpacking, which is turning out to be a pretty big seller for them, and a wonderfully critically received game, those folks, there's like 4 of them motherfuckers. What am I going to do, man? I love it. I think that's the future, man. You get in there and you make your own shit, just like every other medium's becoming. Lord Gareth says, Jaffe triggered the YouTube algorithm, and now I get all kinds of people dissing Jaffe in my recommend. It's so silly. Quizatch Hatterack, hello, buddy. He says, don't worry, guys. If we know Jaffe after playing a Soulsborne, he will declare Metroid amazing. Look, I've played Soulsborne. I loved Demon Souls, and I loved Bloodborne. I couldn't play Bloodborne because it was too fucking hard. But I absolutely played it and thought it was phenomenal. Yes, Caveman, we played Splitgate. It was a lot of fun. Answering Spazbo, we will play Mario Party. I phrased it a mental health day, which is fair. I mean, it was. But over the weekend when we were supposed to do Mario Party game night, I just, it was one of those days I woke up and I just couldn't get with it. And around noon, I'm like, okay, well, you got to push yourself, Jaffe. You'll feel great once you get going with the show. But there was a little voice in my head. You ever think about that? You ever hear those little voices in your head? And you got to listen to them. Everybody who's ever been successful says, listen to that voice. And I agree. That's been my experience as well. And I was just like, yeah, it was saying to me, it's like, yeah, not today. You need to take it easy today. And I think what we did? I'll tell you what we did. I swear we're going to get into video game talk, I promise. Give me 1 second. So everybody had been telling me for quite some time how great the show Ted Lasso is. And I'm not a big soccer guy, but I like sports, and I believed it was good. I wasn't thinking people were full of shit, but I never really sat down. But the family sat down, or at least 3 of us, we sat down and started watching it, and we watched the whole fucking first season, and it was just so good that tomorrow night we're going to start the second season. And if you've watched the show, you know what I'm talking about when I tell you before we watch it, me and my son are going to bake some of the Ted Lasso biscuits to eat while we're watching season 2. That's how deep in the rabbit hole we are, fellas. Let's talk a little bit. It will be proof. Rasmanian Devil says, Jaffe is a Souls fan. This better be some damn good proof. What it will be is for all of you guys who are always saying, we support the developer. The developer doesn't want difficulty mode. I want to show you that actually your view is not developer friendly. Your view is actually kind of not what the developer wants. We'll talk about that in just a second. I do want to tell you a little bit about some new information that you may have already seen, but I did a video and we talked a little bit recently about Amy Hennig's new game. And if you watch the video, one of the guys from MinMax, the head MinMax guy, Ben Hansen, had somebody who was watching the Kevin Smith show that he streams on YouTube, and he says, hey, the guy who he co-hosts with is writing Amy's new game, or is one of the writers. And a bunch of people in the chat were guessing what it was, because obviously we know it's a Marvel game, but no one has said anything else, and they won't for quite some time. And later in the podcast or in the stream, Kevin Smith is like, dude, the chat got it exactly, right? And so if you go back and look at the chat, which is out of sync, it turns out, it was either Ant-Man or it was Fantastic Four. And I was convinced it was Ant-Man because I was like, well, Fantastic Four seems like a terribly boring game. The powers seem really boring. It just seems kind of like, we've played that game before, and I thought Amy could do great with, she could do great with anything, but Ant-Man made sense for what she had brought to Uncharted, that kind of fun, swashbuckling kind of take, at least as Paul Rudd plays it. And then the shrinking and growing, especially with the SSD, if they're using the SSD, if it's, we know it's going to be on PlayStation, it might only be PlayStation, I doubt it though. You could do a lot of amazing scale shifts almost instantaneously, right? Well, so Ben Hansen from MinMax reached out to me, and again, I've never had a problem with Ben. I have a problem with some of his co-hosts. I was happy he reached out to me. We had a nice little chat briefly on my YouTube, and here's what he said. We were just talking about it, and he said, well, I said, why do you think that this is Fantastic Four? Because he's convinced it's Fantastic Four. And I said, why do you think that it's the Fantastic Four, not Ant-Man? And he said, well, he gave me a couple of reasons, and I just wanted to share them with you because I wasn't able to find the part of the podcast because he said it was out of sync with the chat. So what he said was, number one, in her official statement, Amy Hennig says she's enabling players to embody these heroes that they love. And he's saying that was plural heroes. I'm like, okay, maybe. Because obviously the Fantastic Four are 4, Ant-Man is 1, but you could also throw in the Wasp and suddenly you've got 2. So that one didn't sell me. One's coming up that does sell me a little bit more, though. He said the actor Janina Gavankar said she was involved, which, sure, she could be playing Wasp, he says, but it would be odd to lead with the non-Ant-Man character. I don't think she said she was involved like a big announcement. I think it was just more like she kind of mentioned it in more of a passing way. I don't think it was like a big, she's the star of this new thing. And even if she was, since when is the Invisible Girl or Invisible Woman the star? So that one doesn't sell me. 3 is confusing. 3 says the Avengers game, this has been talking, already touched on Ant-Man a bit. So you'd think Marvel would want to tap into something completely new. Maybe he means like the Pym particles or something, which the guy who plays Ant-Man, invented. Not the guy who plays Ant-Man, but Ant-Man, the hero, Hank Pym invented. Although it's Scott Lang now, but it doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, maybe. But this is the one that made more sense. And Mutant Mo in the chat is saying he actually watched this stream, so you can confirm if this is true or not. He says people watching the stream live, and I guess Ben was not one of them, said that Kevin Smith reacted that way before anyone guessed Ant-Man. So apparently when somebody in the chat said Fantastic Four, if you go back and sync it up, because again, for some weird reason it's out of sync, if you go back and sync it up with the time code, when somebody in the chat guesses Fantastic Four, that comes before Ant-Man, and Kevin Smith apparently has a very visible reaction. So if, it's hard to argue with that. It's hard to believe it's Ant-Man after Kevin Smith responded in a very positive way before Ant-Man was even brought up. So, look, I love Marvel. I love Amy's games for the most part. I'll play it because it's Fantastic Four as well. I'm a little bummed because I don't think the Fantastic Four is going to make that great of a game. If you're looking at your screen right now and you don't know much about the Fantastic Four, I love the characters, especially Ben Grimm, but it's basic, it's the stuff you've seen your whole fucking life, right? In terms of games, it's like Ben Grimm's the strong guy, Invisible Girl's the stealth. This guy's projectile, Johnny Storm, and Mr. Fantastic is sort of ranged melee. It sort of just feels like, I'm sure it'll be great, but it doesn't jump off the page, if you know what I mean. Scotty Shooter says, Ben Hansen is great. Excellent podcast host and seems like a nice guy. Yeah, even when I was watching the Min-Max stuff, when his co-hosts were being total dicks to me, even in those moments, it seemed that Ben didn't jump into the fray. It seemed like he was just like, I'm not even acknowledging what you guys... It doesn't mean he likes me or he's a good guy and those guys are bad guys. It just means that even during somebody shit-talking you, he comes across as very likable. So you may be absolutely right, Scott. I hope you don't take it the wrong way, but I hope you bury the hatchet. I don't have a hatchet out with Ben Hansen. I have a massive hatchet out with his co-hosts that I think are absolute dickheads. Quizat says Jaffe. What's up, pal? He said Min-Max is a podcast, Wolfblood. Some of the guys left Game Informer, and I guess they went on and made Min-Max. Jaffe, are you concerned, says Paul Atreides, that all of the creative talent is being driven to existing IP? I want to see creative people in the industry flex those muscles. Well, I'm not concerned because I'm not an exclusive console player, but I absolutely 100% understand what you're talking about. I mean, you see that in pretty much every business, right? Every business is... Things are getting more expensive, and games is certainly console-based games. AAA games are no exception. And in that, they need to get every finger hold and toe hold on the mountain wall they're climbing that they can. And if associating, I'll give you a great example. Do you remember a couple of years ago the guys who made and the ladies who made Saints Row put out kind of a superhero team squad game. What was it called? Like State of Agent. You know what I'm talking about? It kind of came and went, got okay reviews or whatever. But these were brand new characters, right? Brand new world, brand new IP. And the game wasn't great. Apparently, I didn't play it. So no one showed up. But ultimately, though, yeah, if you're going to market a game like that and you can say, oh, it's from Agents of Mayhem, there you go, Eddie T. If you're going to market a game, you can say, oh, it's from Marvel and it's the Fantastic Four. And, oh, by the way, did you know the Fantastic Four just put a movie out 6 months ago that Marvel spent tons of money marketing? I understand why when you're spending well over $100 million to make video games that you're going to use you're going to use everything that you can get to push the needle. Rob wants you to know, and I want you to know, Rob is currently in the call-in waiting room. If you want to call in and talk live on the show and debate, discuss, I'm here for you, pal. I am absolutely here for you. Let us get into what topic we're going to start with. Let's start with Dark Souls. So I want to show you, this is where it started. First, I saw my new best friend, Gene Park, from the Washington Post, who covers video games. I had a great chat with him a few weeks back about Metroid, actually. You can find it on this very channel. And, I've seen this going around today. I saw it from him, and then somebody was saying Jeff Grubb was talking about difficulty modes again. Like, this thing keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And I don't know what started it, but I want to show you where I kind of jumped on to the on-ramp with this. So there's this tweet by a guy named @LonXer, and you can look at your screen if you want to see some of this stuff, because there is gameplay footage, but I'll explain it. He says Dark Souls is supposed to be difficult. If you don't like that, then just don't play it. And he's responding to someone named Rudism, who is he's got a blue check. I don't know who he is, but Alienware Oz, I don't know who he is. But he says Forza 5 Horizon has an accessibility option that lets you directly alter the game speed. Physics are preserved, but everything else plays out slower, giving you more reaction time. This is a fantastic example of what I mean. If you're not watching your screen, what's happening is it's basically, you can play the entire game in, I don't know if you can slide the speed, but what it looks like we're looking at in this clip is maybe it's going, you can hit a button and it drops to like 75, 50% of the speed. In fact, let's see. He's going to the accessibility and he says game speed. Yeah, you can tune it all up and down the dial. So he drops it down to 40%. The game maintains its physics integrity, its gameplay integrity, but everything's just moving slower, okay? And what's interesting about this is even moving slower, the guy who is playing it still slams into the wall. So he is right in the sense that it's not that it makes the game easier necessarily. Like the curves are still the curves, the tuning of the cars is still the tuning of the cars. It just allows people who have a bit of a slower response time to appreciate the game. And when he says, when you go to show this thread on this Rudism guy, he says people would say, but that would make the game too easy. And Rudism says, this is his tweet now, he says, sure, for you, but there are others out there who would find the game impossible due to reasons outside their control. Setting like these make the game, well, not impossible. That's the beauty of options. They're optional. So I got to thinking about this because I absolutely am as you would imagine, I hope, you would imagine I am a fan of developers and directors of teams having the final say on this stuff. I'm not looking for design by committee at all. I think games are art and they are expressions of the team and the key team members oftentimes who make those games. And if somebody wants a game to be hard, I think that is at their discretion and that's fine. I think the problem with this, and I do want to center it on Dark Souls specifically, just because that's, or Bloodborne, because these are the kind of games that usually come up. But I think this logic I'm about to share with you, which will convince you, because you can't deny the logic I'm about to put on your plate for dinner. It will convince you, but I'm going to apply it to Bloodborne, but it can apply to any video game out there. Okay, so if you're not looking at your screen, I've got a picture of Bloodborne up there, the box, and then which by the way, I know why. I think it was because Gene or someone else online was talking about, hey, was Bloodborne announced today coming to PC, or it leaked, or there's more indication that there is a Bloodborne PC coming. I know that. And we can all assume it's going to happen. So Bloodborne's up there, and I think somebody was tweeting, it's like, look, if you've been wanting to play Bloodborne, get it for PC, because somebody's going to release a mod that lets you have accessibility options to tune the difficulty, which I know a lot of people would be up in arms about. Fine. Now, this is where I'm going to make you a believer, a true believer, right? So if you're looking at the screen, I have 4 little bars going up like a bar graph. I've got a light blue one, which let's just say it stands for super easy. A dark blue one stands for easy. Hello, Clavin. I'm doing a stream. What are you doing?
I'm going to ask, okay, tomorrow.
Come say hi to all the nice folks, though.
Hello, nice folks.
Okay.
Tomorrow,
my boy just walked in. Give me just a minute, baby. Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow, can I go to ice skating place with Alex? His mom would take me from school to there. We go back to Alex's place, and then can you pick me up from out there?
I'm gonna let the chat vote, and if they say yes, I'll pick you up.
Okay.
I'll let you know after the stream. I gotta talk to Mom. All right. Sorry about that, fellas. That's the boy. That's my priority. He's going ice skating tomorrow. Okay, listen. So if you look at the screen, there's easy light blue, normal. So super easy is light blue, easy normal whatever is blue. Red is hard, and orange is like super fucking hard. Okay, so if we're visualizing the difficulty of a game, let's say that the designers of Bloodborne want everybody to feel like they are in this red zone right here, which is the hard. Okay, it could be anywhere, but let's just, for the sake of this argument, say they want you to feel like you're in the hard. So not too easy, not scorchingly difficult, hard. That's what the director and the team want. Okay. So now here's the same chart with 4 people on it, without the game having changed at all in terms of tuning, right? I know Ninja is not to everyone's liking or taste, but I'm only putting him up there as a representation of, professional esport gamer, okay? So for Ninja, the way Bloodborne is tuned, I know, just go with it. Let's just call this guy MLG. For MLG, the way Bloodborne is tuned, it would be a little more difficult than easy, okay? For me, the way Bloodborne is tuned, at the moment, it would be scorchingly difficult. That's me over there on the right. My head is in one of the orange blocks that represent difficult. Then I've got Rob the Mod over here when I think he said he was 10 here, picking up a Vita. And Rob's a better gamer than I am, but he's not as good as Spazbo, who's represented here by Sonic, which is his avatar. So for Rob and Spazbo, these guys would be absolutely in the sweet spot of what the director and designers of Bloodborne said they want the game to deliver to an audience, right? So then really the only argument that you can, I mean, again, I support their right to do whatever the fuck they want. It's their game. But the argument that tends to be thrown around is it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to be punishing, right? So even if the director of Bloodborne wanted it to be in the orange, which is the scorchingly hard, trust me, there's degrees. So if Rob and Spazbo moved over there, I would move way fucking far to the right. Okay, because I wouldn't even be in the conversation at that point, because I could barely play more than 10 seconds of the fucking game, okay? So at that point, you have to ask yourself, are you really defending the developer, or are you really defending your sort of social club and sense of, gatekeeping of a certain kind of gamer? Because if the Bloodborne guys are saying, we want everybody to experience the red, well, since the red is different for everybody, don't you think adding a slider? Because I think what a lot of people get confused by is when people say, we want a difficulty option. What that means is we want Bloodborne to be easy. It's like, I don't think it has to mean that. Why can't it mean that we want Bloodborne to be red, which is hard, but hard is subjective. Games are interactive. Games are smart. Games are able to learn and recognize the player behavior. Why in the world can't we have the game go, what the director wanted, I can use math and algorithms, same fucking thing, to serve that up to every single person. And if you don't want that, that's fine, but don't come out and say Bloodborne's supposed to be hard then, because that's not really what you're saying. What you're saying is Bloodborne gives me as a gamer the ability to showboat and peacock and gatekeep and feel good about myself and feel good about my skills, which is a total valid, fine thing to want to feel. But at that point, just own it. But don't say that you're supporting the developer's vision, because the developer's vision is not that. According to when you listen to them talk, they want to make a hard game. But hard for you is impossible for me, and hard for you might be easy for someone else. So that is my proof. I've laid it down for you. Now we can discuss, and then we'll move on. Spaz says, games like Bloodborne are tough very early on, but it's not until you get used to the mechanics and get better gear when the game starts getting better. I understand. However, even that though, right? Games like Bloodborne are tough early on. Again, you're tough because you're one of the best players I've seen, Spazbo, outside of competing esports players. You're fast, you're quick, you understand things your reflexes are great. Gamers like you would feel it would be tough very early on, but if I don't have an option to adjust or the game isn't adjusting via AI, it's not tough for me early on. It's near fucking impossible. Zaf says the director himself said he wants a shared experience of difficulty overcoming challenging tasks. I understand. But there's two ways to look at that phrase. Does he want everybody... Basically, does he want only a small sliver of his customer base to be able to complete the game and play the game? Or does he want everyone to have a shared experience of difficulty, but the game under the hood is determining what that is for you as an individual, right? Rob the Mod says Bloodborne was super easy for him, right? Jaffe, call it what it is. Typical Japanese dude mindset. Their way is the only way. I hate that game design mind frame. That's why I love FF14. Director grew up playing Western games. I don't know. I don't play FF14, but again, I look, if somebody wants to put out a game and they want to say this is meant to be hard as fuck, even for MLG players, awesome. But that's not what the guy has said. I'm going to bring in let me bring in Dustin first of the Illinois Dustins, and I'll bring in Jake, who's been waiting, and then I'll bring in Rasmanian Devil. Dustin, you old knucklehead, how you doing, pal?
I was not expecting to be on that quickly. Holy shit. How are you, Jaffe?
Well, I'm good, but I know this is a topic near and dear to a number of people's hearts, and I didn't want to move on to the next topic until I got people in here. I assume, because I want to say I've heard you talk about this before, but I assume you have an opinion on this.
I do. Well, okay, so I'm kind of in the middle with you here, because I totally agree that there are Souls fans that want to use this series as the gatekeeping that you speak of, right? But at the same time, too, I think there are a lot of Souls fans that want to keep the integrity of the series thus far with its difficulty options. And
you mean with its lack of difficulty options?
Right. The lack of
keeping
it to the developer, Miyazaki, whatever you want to say, their intention. And so I think something that's very important that is I don't know if it's understated, or I feel like it's never portrayed in the right way, because it has to do with these From Software Soulsborne elitists, is that, at least for my personal experience, I was terrible at Dark Souls for literally years.
Okay.
I picked up Demon Souls, dropped it, too hard. Picked up Dark Souls, too hard. Dark Souls 2, dropped it. And it wasn't until Bloodborne that it like clicked in my brain. And that feeling when I finally like figured out what they wanted from me as a player is something that I like will never forget. The weekend that Bloodborne clicked in my mind, and that I just went, I think I was like, it was an interesting week because I think I was sick and I like had a fever, so I was off of work and I'm like, what am I going to do other than play Bloodborne? So this is it. I'm going to do it. This is the time I figure this game out. And when I really like got myself into the mindset of what I thought the developers wanted and how I was supposed to play, everything changed, and it no longer was about the game being extremely difficult. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still a hard game. Like, anyone who says, like, oh, well, Dark Souls and Bloodborne's easy once you figure it out is full of shit. They're hard games, period. But they're not impossible. But part of that is how they're designed in order to, I mean, just like to put it straight up, they want you to play these games a certain way.
What do you think? What was the thing for you when it came to Bloodborne that clicked that had not clicked on those other games?
I think that the thing that clicked when it comes to both Bloodborne and Souls games in general is that it's like, I think a lot of us come from like a button mashy type background. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing, but like, you can't just run into a group of enemies and just start slashing like crazy. You just can't do that. You're going to get demolished. Even on the early levels.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's a different way of approaching combat in these games. I'm not saying, you know, this isn't any kind of a like elitist, like, well, this one it's a thinking man's game. It's not like that. It's just different, right? And so,
but do you think? Okay, so do you think
Yeah.
though? I agree with that, and frankly, that's one of the reasons I enjoy Demon Souls and Bloodborne. I feel. I mean, I don't want to get into I can't speak to Bloodborne that intelligently. I can just say that for whatever reason, Demon Souls was a more. It taught me everything that you just said. I had to play it that way, and I got my ass kicked, but it felt doable. Whereas I think Bloodborne for me just threw so much at me right away that I just I felt too overwhelmed and I quit. But that said, though, that trigger that kind of goes, oh, you have to play this a different way. I mean, at that point, then, you know, do you think the games could do a better job by having... See, I think what happens is when people say, I am looking for a game like Bloodborne to have a difficulty slider or whatever, they think I want to turn Bloodborne into God of War or Golden Axe. And it's like,
right.
I would still like, because you're a much better gamer than I am, I would still like to have that same aha moment that you had. But why do I have to basically get good? And at 50 years old, I'm never going to get good you know, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is just physiologically, you know, your reflexes go away to some extent. But regardless of that, though, it's like, I get that if you think adding a slider to Bloodborne is going to take away that aha moment, I would be with you 100%. But if the game could say, for Jaffe, that aha moment comes when the game is tuned like this, and for Dustin, it comes when it's tuned like this, how could a Bloodborne player be upset with that? Because aren't we both at that point, you know, eating the same meal that the chef has prepared?
I guess I can see that, but in the same way, and it's hard to say this because it's so many people have heard arguments like this from the elitist assholes. So I have to be careful because I don't want to come off that way.
Well, you don't, and that's one of the reasons I brought you on first. I don't know a lot of the other people in the chat, and I know that you know, that's not how you present. I mean, you are an elitist asshole, but you've done a good job blocking it and keeping it hidden.
Yeah, sure. So my main thing, when in some of like the interviews I've read with Miyazaki, he's very clear about his intentions about this idea of the sense of accomplishment that these games make you feel, and that sense of accomplishment does not come easy because these games are very difficult. And it's one of those things that it's like, it's not going to be for everyone to suffer through learning how to play these games. And again, it's not an elitism thing, but like, if there was like, let's say, like let's take my example or my history with the series. Like, let's say when I was playing Dark Souls, it's like I died to one of the early bosses 3 times in a row. At that point, with me playing those games, I would have dialed it down because I was like, yeah, I'm frustrated because I've died a few times. And a lot of people would do that. And then they would probably have a much easier time with the next boss, and be like, oh, okay, well, that was tuned that I was able to beat it then, that time. Like,
But why?
I don't know,
Why? But do you think? I mean, when I was making games, I always had like on a whiteboard, I drew, and I don't know if the who was the director of Bloodborne. I don't know. Was it Miyazaki?
That was also Miyazaki.
Okay,
yeah.
So I don't know if he was sitting there going, okay, boss number 1 on the bridge or whatever it was, if I remember. I want the average player who loves this game to die 8 times, right? Well, as long, and if they get frustrated, I'm good with the fact that they may get frustrated for 3 days and come back on the 3rd day or the 4th day and beat it and feel great. And that's what he's going for. I think that's great. I would not want to deny players that. But what I'm saying is that sweet spot that Miyazaki has put on the whiteboard to say this is an 8-death boss, give or take. There's a little wiggle room, of course. The way we get a player like Jaffe to that feeling is numerically different than the way we get a player like Dustin to that feeling. So it's not that you would die 3 times and turn down the difficulty. The game would organize its numbers plugged into the algorithms based on you as a player, and based on sort of the range that you've told the game, either directly or via just your play style, where you fit in the pecking order. So isn't that the ideal situation? Is that the game would adjust to give you that intended difficulty? Because what you just described, you died 3 times. I probably died 25 times if you died 3 times. Anybody who watched me play Kenna Bridge of Spirits and die at that corrupted boss or whatever, I mean, I was on that for 3 hours, and I had really good gamers go, oh yeah, that was really tough. It took me about 4 tries. I'm like, 4 tries, motherfucker. I had a birthday by the time I killed this boss. I mean, it's a very different thing. I mean, don't you think that should be the ideal that we strive for? Or do you think a locked difficulty, because it's almost like sports, right? It's like you can watch a high school football team go up against the number 1 college team in America, and they're going to get their ass handed to them. It's not going to be a good game for them. It's like, is that what we want? Is that anybody who takes on Bloodborne, wherever your skill, it's going to be so fucking hard and your mileage will vary based on how hard it is? Or do we want everybody to have the same kind of aha moments, that you're having because you're a good player?
I guess that there's something to be said about, is every game supposed to be for everybody? Right?
Sure. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean?
So if let's say I go to Dunkin' Donuts and I pull up and I'm like, I'd like a steak dinner, and they're like, why? What? Like, I'm like, yeah, I want a steak dinner, and they're like, we don't make that here. We make coffee and donuts. And it's like, well, I can't eat coffee and donuts. Then the person at Dunkin' Donuts is going to say, well, I suggest you go to Texas Roadhouse or something, because we don't do that here. You know what I mean? And I feel like, I know that you're not of the persuasion that's like, there are people that are like somewhat demanding that From Software needs to do this. I know you're not in that camp, right?
I'm not. I'm just more fascinated why it is such a argued and contentious issue, because I think when I hear myself, and maybe obviously because I'm the one saying it, I hear myself propose this and I go, this is exactly what the developer wants if they could get it. Like if you go to Dunkin' Donuts in your example and you want steak, okay, you've come to the wrong place. But if you go to Dunkin' Donuts and you want to taste the donut, the way the chef has, the way that whoever has created that particular flavor of donut has created, everyone has a different palate. Everybody has a different number of taste buds in their tongue. If the chef could go, I can guarantee that everyone who eats the glazed, donut with the lemon filling is going to have within 10% the same experience, which is either, right? I mean, isn't that what the chef would want? Isn't that what Miyazaki would want?
I guess so. I guess I wouldn't. I can see this aspect of, and I brought this up a second ago, but just that Miyazaki, I don't think, has the intention that Bloodborne or Elden Ring or whatever is for every possible player out there, and that it can adapt for every player. He knows the types of people that like these games, which is in the millions at this point.
Yeah.
Like, none of these other games had needed difficulty sliders to be successful at all. Like, they've never needed that. And I'm guessing, I mean, we don't know about Elden Ring, but we can assume that it's going to follow the same path.
Right.
And we could argue that that's something that's appealing from a market perspective. So yeah, you may be missing out on people that are like, From Software games are too hard for me, and that's okay.
I think you're talking though about sales and marketing of the title. I don't have a problem if that's what it's their game, and I support their right to make whatever they want. I'm talking, I think, more about a fundamental game design philosophy that, you know, and in fact, what you're saying about Bloodborne is if the argument for not having difficulty is we know the game is hard, which is great. I love that the game is hard. But we know the game is hard, and we know that not only is it hard, but we know it is Black Diamond ski hard. Like it's not meant for everybody to experience their version of so hard I almost quit. It's only meant for people to experience that who are already really fucking good. And I can understand that from a standpoint of, you know, maybe there's some bragging rights or whatever that comes along with that. But what I don't really understand is if I get to have the same experience as you do, but your experience isn't diminished, and I still have the same experience, which is, fuck, that was hard. That seems like gatekeeping to me if people don't want that to happen. But they have a right to, of course.
Sure. I guess that, I don't know. I think we're actually more in agreement in some ways in the fact that we both agree that, like, if Miyazaki was like, I want a difficulty slider in Elden Ring, I'd be like, okay, cool, I'm down with that.
But what would the difficulty slider be? The way a lot of people understand it, I would be opposed to it. I mean, he can put whatever he wants in this game. I would never want Bloodborne to feel easy for anyone. I don't.
Okay, so. And someone in chat brought this up. So I guess our angle more is like the idea of the dynamic difficulty, which I think that you've talked about this before in some other streams, like this idea of difficulty that adapts to the player.
Right, because isn't that ultimately what Miyazaki would want? He wants why? I mean, unless he is saying no, Jaffe, you've got it wrong. I want everyone to have the same experience of, this is fucking hard, and there's only 5% of people who buy it that are going to be able to actually complete it. And if that's what he wants, then I totally support his right to have that. But I would assume what he wants is, I want everybody to sort of feel like Dustin did when he died on the third boss, and he's like, fuck, let me go one more time, and that's the time that you really figure it out. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume that is the ideal desire, correct?
Right. That is an interesting idea. I guess the question is, I feel like the dynamic difficulty, like that'd be a really hard thing to tune in order to keep in the vision of the game, like we were mentioning, like the aha moment. Like,
I mean, it's going to get easier as the years drag on with you know, AI getting smarter and all that stuff. For now, I think it's more of a philosophy that ideally people could embrace at the design level and slowly start integrating. I mean, back in the day, I want to say Devil May Cry 1 even had a little bit of dynamic difficulty happening under the hood. I'd like to think that we've come a lot further in it since then, but I none of my games since then ever had it or played with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you can snap your fingers and make it perfect yet.
Right.
But I think the goal is a noble goal to pursue, because all you're going to do is open up games to more people. You're going to, open up games to be finished. I mean, how many people quit games? There's a whole article I was going to talk about later today about, it's everybody knows that most games never get finished. And there's like 5 or 6 key reasons. And one of them is it just gets too hard. I mean, it seems ludicrous to me to spend the hundreds of millions of dollars we do. And one of the reasons people walk away is the difficulty ramped up so much that you were turned off. I mean, again, it's okay to do that, but why would you want to?
Right. Yeah. And I think that the compromise that I could see if we're talking about this idea of a dynamic difficulty, is that I personally want a standardized setting. The idea of the game dynamically making it easier for me because I'm losing would take away from the experience for me, because like even as like after I had platinumed Bloodborne, I had done multiple runs of Dark Souls 3. Sekiro was a bitch for me, to the point where like certain bosses in Sekiro, like I spent multiple nights where like the end of the night is like head in my hands, like about to scream because I can't beat it. And then for me, and not everyone's going to experience and enjoy a game like this, when I finally beat that stupid ape in Sekiro, I lost it. It was like crack, like the best gaming moment I ever had in my life.
Right,
and
but
in the case,
go ahead.
So I guess what I'm saying is just that I would want there to be a standardized experience that's still what we know and love, and that if there was a dynamic difficulty setting where you could recreate that experience somehow for everybody, that'd be cool. I would be in favor of that. I would be very skeptical of something like that actually working, though, at least with what we have now.
Okay, right, but you are saying that ape, monkey, whatever it was, I didn't play it. I heard it was too hard, so I stayed away. That boss, you would have no problem if the code could do it. That under the hood, if it could give me the same experience. So it would still be punishingly hard. I would have my head in my hands at the end of the night as well. It would just be, if you played my version, it wouldn't do that. It would be much easier. But I don't perceive it as easy, and you don't perceive yours as easy or hard. You perceive it as your experience. You would be okay with that, is what you're saying.
I mean, I guess now I think that I right now would say yes.
Yeah.
But I just don't. I'm too skeptical about
yeah, I mean,
something like in that type of game in particular. Like you mentioned, like Devil May Cry, and I think that there's talk about Resident Evil 4 that had like dynamic difficulty under the hood, and like I can see something in like that, but I don't know how that would work in a game like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's got, it's going to get there whether we're alive for it or not. I mean, imagine if you ever watch Star Trek going on the holodeck and, for Picard, whatever the shootout in the 1920s bar when he's playing whatever the detective is perfect, and then Riker goes in there and gets his ass kicked. I mean, it's almost ludicrous to imagine the future of gaming, where the game doesn't write itself to you in order to give you a predetermined experience that the game or the director wants. Because the minute you do that, it really breaks immersion. And it really starts, I was playing some horror game recently, like last week, and I loved it. But then after I died 2 or 3 times running from the monster, I know what it was. It was that one where you're trapped in the toy factory. And Pepe Le Pew, Poppy, whatever the fuck it's called. And so I'm running from this thing, and the first time it's really unnerving and scary, and then afterwards, after about 3 or 4 times, it's like, okay, left, okay, this curve's coming up, go right, okay, this is a duck down, and I no longer was immersed in the world that the game worked so hard to create. I was just almost like working at a factory pulling levers at the right moment. And so
right.
I think we're going to have to get to a point where the game keeps you in the groove of the immersion, if we're talking about stuff like the holodeck. But anyway, okay, I hear you. I appreciate it. And as always, Dustin, it's great to talk to you. I hope you guys are doing well over there at Last Man. And call back anytime as always, bud.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This was fun. Let's talk again soon.
Absolutely. See you, man. There goes Dustin. Let me bring in Jake. Jake, it's Jaffe. Thanks for waiting. What's up, man?
Jaffe, I think you're full of it.
Full of what, Jake? Full of what, Jake?
On this difficulty thing, I do not.
No. What am I full of?
The fact that they need difficulty.
Can you not? Are you with your mama? Can you not say the word shit? Are you?
What?
Are you saying I'm full of shit?
Yeah.
So say shit, baby. Say it. Let it out. Let her rip.
I decided not to.
Ah, you're a good boy. You're going to heaven. All right, go ahead. What's the problem? Why am I full of shit?
I do not think we need a difficulty in a Souls game.
Why not?
They're built for the challenge. They're challenging for a reason. They're based on old school Nintendo hard, super challenging games like Zelda 1, Ninja Gaiden, and all those.
Yeah. But what about what I was what about what I was just saying, which was it would be difficult and super hard for everybody. The game would adjust in real time. So my hard would be different than your hard, but we would still experience the vision of the director, which is a old school hard Nintendo kick your ass game. I'm not saying you can ever have a switch on Bloodborne that makes it feel easy for anyone.
Yeah, I don't see the point. Keep the way it is. It's fine the way it is. The series doesn't need to change anything up. Don't fix it if it's not broken.
Well, okay, sure. No one is no, and I'll get to the super chats and the new members in just a second, fellas. I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. I'm not saying it's broken. I'm saying that. Do you think? I guess what I'm confused by is gamers like you who don't want it to change. If what I'm proposing could work, and it may take 20 years for us to get the algorithm right, but let's hypothetically assume what I'm saying could work. Why is it bad for me to have it feels so elitist to me, because then it feels like what you're saying is, yes, the AI could make the game Jaffe super hard versus Jake Bob super hard, and we would have the exact same level of hard and different. It would just be different under the hood, but we wouldn't even be aware of it. You're not a fan of that. It's like what you seem to be more of a fan of is, haha, I did it, and I like that being in that elite club, and that's okay, but maybe you should just say that versus the game doesn't need difficulty. Because... right? I mean, because that's what you really like about it, is that only a few people can do it, and you're one of them, correct?
I'm not one of them. I actually don't really care about the series. I respect their vision of not having difficulty settings, though, and making it super easy. I respect that they should keep it the way it is.
Oh, sure. I think they have every right to make whatever fucking game they want, but I'm saying if they had the ability to give more people the same experience, I think that would be closer to respecting their vision.
But that might ruin what made the series great in the first place, and would start forcing people to go away.
Why?
People love Dark Souls because it's the challenge. They like.
But that would not change. That would absolutely not change. Why would that change?
I'm not sure. I don't know, but it would feel people would start moving away because they don't feel like they would have that challenge.
Listen to me. Listen to me. Do you know Jake Bob 555? I love you, right? You know I love you, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't think you know what the fuck I'm talking about. Jake Bob, call back anytime. I appreciate it, buddy. He don't know what I'm talking about. Andy Lee, it's Jaffe. What's up?
Hey, Jaffe. Let me say that I totally agree with your stance that games are better if they're more accessible. The Forza features great, etc. And I have been the Dark Souls series. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit and propose this argument, which I think the first caller was alluding to a little bit. In your example, let's take the example of like Rob, who beats it on Red, and for him, it's like a sublime experience. He reaches a level of whatever you want to call it, determined gaming that he never thought he had in him.
Yes.
And it just felt incredible to reach that top of that mountain.
Yep.
So I think what some of the diehard Souls fans are, why they argue about this, part of it is because they think that if there were like an easy option, yes, you would make the game more approachable and include a bigger audience, but you may also rob, no pun intended, of his sublime experience.
But yes, you're right, but who is proposing an easy option? Do you think I'm proposing an easy option?
Well, okay, forget that. For the sake of the argument, let's forget your utopian AI difficulty, which would be great.
It's not utopian.
Traditional.
Okay, then traditional, I would be opposed to it. I'm not
like easy, normal, hard.
If you're basically saying the setting of easy, normal, hard could hit 75% of the gamers who buy the game the same way or close enough that that language would make sense, easy, normal, hard, then I would be opposed to it. for two reasons. One is the developer doesn't want it, and B, anybody who has played these games knows the minute you take away the need to really think and be mentally engaged in the experience almost 24/7 when you're playing it, the game becomes a beautiful looking version of Golden Axe that's going to get boring in about 20 minutes. So
Correct.
I would
That's
be,
the
I would
Souls
be,
argument,
yeah.
yeah.
I would be totally opposed to that, but that's not what I'm proposing.
Okay, well, so clarify me with what you're proposing there.
I am saying all I'm saying is the same thing that you described that Rob experienced, that sense of sublime, almost too hard, but not hard enough that I stuck with it through the torture of it, and I had this, epiphany of coming out the other side and going, oh my God, that was so cathartic. I want everyone to have that. I am saying that the AI and the slider, the player wouldn't have control over the slider, but the AI would recognize somehow, whether you manually input it or it recognizes your playstyle, says, this guy, to give this guy the red experience, we need to tune these 8 variables. This guy's really fucking good. He's not going to get the red experience. He's going to get the blue experience, but I want him to have the red experience, so we need to tune these 5 variables, right? And so everybody lives in the red space. That would be the goal. Everybody experiences a punishing game. But I think what's frustrating to me is some gamers, or a lot of gamers that defend this, unless they're thinking what you were originally thinking, which is easy is traditionally easy, everybody deserves that same sense of catharsis and that sense of punishing. But it seems weird to me that you would deny people of that just because they are not as skilled as you are. And I understand you need to be skilled to win, but skilled is subjective. It's different for everyone.
That difficulty idea that you propose, is that something that exists in any form today?
It exists in various games. Like I said, the first one I ever heard about was Devil May Cry, Left 4 Dead, and somebody was saying, I think Dustin was saying Resident Evil 4. And it's very rudimentary right now. I mean, it's very simple stuff like, okay, he's getting his ass kicked, let's lower the hit points on the enemies, or he's doing really well, let's up the hit points on the enemies. I mean, I don't think it's that sophisticated, but it could be if we started putting more of our effort into it. And I think ultimately, look, Bloodborne is one of those games that I wish I could play, because the lore and the visuals and the world is so fucking cool, and I'll never be able to play it unless, like somebody said today on Twitter, if they are putting Bloodborne out on PC, maybe somebody will mod it, and then people like us can play it, or people like me can play it. But it exists, but it's nascent. It's gonna take time, and it's gonna take an embracing by the industry to create smarter and smarter AI to adjust in real time.
Okay, but the popular argument that exists, like on Twitter, that the Blood and Soul series brings up, I think that by you proposing this idea, it kind of circumvents the argument completely. The people that are arguing the argument and why it rages so much is they're presenting the classical, why not have an easy mode? Why not have 3 difficulty settings?
No agreement with that at all. I think that would be stupid.
No, but that's the main argument that causes all the controversy, because people are saying, and really it's not that different from yours, which is, why not just give the option and let the player decide for themselves? MLG can pick hard and get the sublime experience that he gets for being on hard. The guy that's hard for the game, like you can put it on easy, and then it'll be a lot easier. So that's what the popular argument is. People
right,
are
but
saying,
that's not. But that's not what I'm proposing. I think that's a terrible idea.
Okay, but I mean, how is that any? You supported the Forza accessibility option. Why is that different than the Souls having a slider bar?
Well, because every game's different. If what people are telling me is true, and Miyazaki is genuinely interested in Bloodborne, if he wants everybody to have the same experience in Bloodborne, which is, this is a hard as fuck game, and it grinds at your brain, it grinds at your time, and eventually you have one of those moments of like, oh my God, I finally get it, I finally did it, and it feels great. If he's saying that is my goal, I think the worst thing in the world is to have a mode that I would be able to play that just feels easy and I can barrel through it. I don't think that's what he's trying to achieve. So but Forza is different. Forza clearly wants to be a much more mainstream, popular game that any and everybody can pick up and play.
So I would guess that if Miyazaki heard that idea and it could be implemented, he'd be for it. But he's being presented on the face of it of being asked by the press or whoever this is coming from, why can't you make an easier mode so that more people can experience the game? That's fundamentally the question he's being asked and what's causing the heart of the debate.
Well, look, anybody who doesn't understand that debate's a fucking moron. Anybody who actually doesn't understand if you don't apply the answer through the filter or put the answer through the filter I'm proposing or a different kind of filter that does the same thing, simply adding an easy mode to Bloodborne, I think is dumb. And I think anybody who argues for it is just selfish and stupid and disrespectful to the creators. It's like, in that sense, I agree. Not every game is for you if it has to come at the expense of harming the vision of the creator. That's ludicrous.
I mean, and that's, again, let me start the disclaimer by I actually am 100% in your camp, but I think you're like just kind of avoiding the argument altogether if you're saying let's pull out a magic wand that can make every experience, but it's kind of it's a technology that doesn't really exist in in the way you described it.
Well, it's not technology that really necessarily needs to be invented. Let's put it this way. If I were to ever go back into games and make like a combat heavy game, I would absolutely hire one or two people totally focused on dynamic AI to create this in the context of the game that we need. It's not like we're talking about time travel. It's just a lot of games don't do it for a variety of reasons. And it would be hard, though. It would take a while to get it. But let's assume, though, for the moment, though, the argument people are having does not include my variation on it, then I don't understand the people who say this game should have an easy mode in that context. I don't think it makes any sense.
Okay, I think I just hit a key point in my mind. Then the main feature that makes the difference between, for you, with this is a good idea versus a bad idea, is that in the utopian vision, the player doesn't have a choice, which is what Souls is right now. There's one difficulty, you don't have a choice, take it or leave it. And in your utopia, the AI would model itself magically to an individual, give them exactly the red experience, and then therefore it causes the same result. The player doesn't have a choice and they get the sublime experience.
Yeah.
But you do have a problem with giving the choice to the player that you don't want. Am I making clear?
Ideally, yeah. I take issue with your word like magical and utopia because you describe it in such a way that anyone hearing this that doesn't know necessarily how games are made, that what I'm proposing is so you make it sound like I'm proposing Milo from Kinect, like something just so 150 years in the future that why even discuss it? I mean, this is just dynamic difficulty scaling. But that said, though, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, and I agree.
Okay, well, I think that's an interesting thing to at least make explicit, is that giving the control to the player on the difficulty to pick, that ultimately is what you deem as being a mistake. And I can think a lot of people would agree with you on that. That's sort of the original argument I'm making, is that there are some players for which if you give them that option, they'll take it and they'll rob themselves of that sublime experience.
If you're Rob or Spaz and you have the manual option to put it on easy, and then you put it on easy and you end up robbing yourself of the experience because your red now drops down to light blue.
Right.
I mean, I can understand the danger with that, sure. I could see that being something that a lot of developers would say, we want it to happen under the hood and we don't want the player to even be aware of it. Yeah, I would be down with that as well, because as a director, I don't want my vision compromised and suddenly everybody's having a light blue experience for a game that's designed to be red.
Okay, but I just want to be clear. You recognize that you are kind of siding on the Dark Souls elitists on like the Twitter wars, because they're the ones that are saying no, do not give an easy option. That hurts the integrity of what the Souls are about.
That's not accurate, though. That's not what I'm saying. Because I feel everybody can handle a red experience, but everybody's red experience is different in terms of what it's going to take to get them there. So I want everybody to have the experience color that the designer director wants them to have. So it's not elitist. It's actually saying, because I mean, think about if this idea can work, and when this idea does work, think about how much more what I'm proposing is actually respectful of Miyazaki and Bloodborne, or the people who make Demon Souls or what have you. Because, you know, Rob has said he thought Bloodborne was easy. Well, that's bad. We don't, you know, Miyazaki didn't want anybody to feel Bloodborne was easy, so Rob fucked it up for him. Right? Everybody should get the color that the designer intended. And this is a system that, if we start building it, could allow that.
Well, let me say one quick thing about dynamic difficulty. I could see that, though, falling into the same argument where you give the player the choice. Let's say there is dynamic difficulty and it works as well as you describe. How, to me, it's almost an impossible solution to be, because let's say Rob dies on a boss. I think Rob would probably get a kick out of us using him over and over. Let's say he dies on a boss like 5 times, right? Yep. And then at what point does the dynamic difficulty kick in and go, okay, he clearly died and he took one hit and it was over. Let's scale it down a little bit. Versus if you just let it go at what it was, he would eventually beat it on attempt 37 and then stand up in his living room with his arms raised. But how does the dynamic difficulty know? That's a thorny problem. Well,
okay, but then you're just talking about how to solve the problem. I mean, you have to figure out what you want to build first. But I would say that's why I was talking with Dustin about like the rudimentary version in Devil May Cry or Resident Evil, which is let's scale hit points, let's scale enemies. I mean, there are other things that you could track. You could track how long the player has been away from the game, for example. A lot of times, if a game is hard, I'll come back the next day and try again, right? But you can start to recognize, shit, this player is starting to come back less and less and less. He's disengaging, right? He's no longer interested. Or he was playing carefully the first 5 times, and now the next couple of times it's starting to feel hopeless, and he's just like, fuck this shit, right? I mean, there's a number of behaviors I think that the game could start to recognize as being disengagement, and where is the sweet spot between I'm disengaged but I'm not quitting, and disengagement leads to say, fuck this whole game. So, I mean, it's an advanced piece of, comparatively, compared to Devil May Cry, AI that we're talking about. But the goal would be, if Miyazaki wants people to stand up after dying 37 times in their living room and scream, I did it, everybody should have that experience or close to it.
I think, and this is another form of the argument, me knowing that there's a dynamic difficulty and knowing that maybe I just read about that feature in a magazine preview, and then now I'm on like my 8th or 9th time, and then the boss dies, and there's a little part in the back of my mind that's thinking, well, did the game become easy because I died 8 times in a row? So it still robs me a little bit of that celebratory moment, knowing that, oh, well, maybe I didn't actually beat that first boss that I died on the first attempt, and that seems impossible. I beat a slightly easier version of that. Behind the scenes, there was a bunch of strings being pulled.
I mean, sure. I think that could happen. There are ways potentially around that. I mean, you could. It may get to a point where it just becomes so ubiquitous no one thinks about it, right? I mean, you don't think about when you go into a deathmatch game or a team deathmatch game, there's matchmaking happening under the hood. If you have a really good game, it's because a lot of reasons, not the least of which is you've been matched up with players that are close enough to your skill to give you the experience the game director and designers intended. So that's already happening in multiplayer anyway. It wouldn't surprise me if it just sort of became accepted over time. But I do understand that sense of purity. But at that point, you really could answer that the real purity is the math adjusting in real time to give you the experience the designer wanted you to have, right? Because there would be no baseline of what Bloodborne would be. The baseline would be Miyazaki's vision for everyone to have the same kind of experience, right? It wouldn't be, but there's really this other mode where the AI is not fucking around with anything, because it wouldn't exist. The game would always be fluid and adjusting.
Jeffy, I very much appreciate the discussion.
Yep.
I'll let the others come in. I'd be curious to hear from the others to ask them the question, if there was a dynamic difficulty working behind the scenes in a great way, the way you want, does that rob them a little bit of the
Right.
victory?
I will ask him. Let me get some super chats. Thank you, buddy. Thanks, Andy. I appreciate it, man, as always. All right, let me get these super chats and new members. Ed OOG Gaming, thank you, buddy, so much. You've been a member of the Diet Soda Soldiers for 5 months. Very much appreciate the support, good sir. Everybody, if you can, give good sir Ed a picture of my new wife and girlfriend. She's the same person. She starts the girlfriend, she becomes the wife. That's how I do it here in California. Green Monkey, thank you for the super chat, buddy. He says, I am not sure about Souls games, but Sekiro I think will fall apart with easy mode because unlike Tsushima, it doesn't sell power fantasy. Yeah, again, I think the argument, thank you for the chat, thank you for the comment. The argument really has nothing to do with easy mode. No one would ever perceive Sekiro as being easy. It's just that my version of easy is different than your version of easy. Hang on a sec. This is a chat from a different era. I appreciate it, buddy. Soulsborne is a genre identifier because of difficulty. The audience knows the price of entry. A handicap slider would detract from its identity. Yes, I agree. Thank you for the chat. I don't think anyone's proposing a handicap slider. Or at least, I mean, there would be things happening under the hood, but you would never have a Soulsborne game be easy at all. No one is. I'm not proposing that for sure. That's not what I'm talking about. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. And then Haunter, how you doing, buddy? Thank you for the super chat. He says, people never talk about how Soulsborne games do allow you to scale the difficulty via respecting Miyazaki's vision. If you're stuck, you can try leveling up, upgrade your gear, summon a co-op player, etc. Yeah, the only reason I'm pausing on that, I mean, yes, you have a good point, but I think even that, I get your point. I also struggle to totally embrace it only because when I was playing Demon Souls, if it hadn't been, and I had never played it before it came out for PS5, if I was playing Demon Souls and I didn't have the chat with me to explain a lot of that shit, I wouldn't have gotten as far as I did. And I was upgrading gear or leveling up or what have you. And so I know what you're saying is correct, but I do wonder because the game seems to intentionally go out of its way not to share this data with you. And I've heard people say, well, the intention was for people to play it together and talk about it and stuff. And again, if that's the vision, great. But I would, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I would love to see that quote where Miyazaki has said, we have kept how to play the game obtuse intentionally because I want people to go online and talk to buddies online to learn this shit. He may have, but I'd love to see that. But thank you for that. Zav says, you feel matchmaking though, and it doesn't scale down to your level. It keeps it hard. Again, it depends on the matchmaking. The goal, I've done like 4 games where we had to do online matchmaking. And for us, our goal was never to keep it consistently hard. It was to keep it consistently engaging. And so if there is a team that has tuned their deathmatch to be hard, then that's their design. But I know with our stuff, we were always hoping to put people in matches where it would be just on that razor's edge of victory and it would be engaging till the buzzer wore out every single time. I mean, that's the best games to watch. It's the best games to play. What happened with the horror stream, says Wolfblood? Nothing happened to him, man. I'm just trying to figure out a way to, thank you, Mutant Mo. I'm trying to figure out a way to do them that brings more people to the yard. Right now, whenever I do them, there's like 4 people in there, and I want to make them more popular and more exciting. But I definitely want to do them, Wolfblood, for sure. Okay, I'm going to bring in these calls. I'm going to keep these calls quick because I've got to get you guys on the same page with me about how Nintendo is heading for a cliff, and I want to talk to you guys about that. So, Darth Nugget, we're going to talk about that. Darth Nugget says old NES games didn't hold your hand either. We're going to talk about that. That's exactly what I mean. We'll get to that, but let me bring these calls in first. I'm just going to bring them in one by one. We're going to go quick if you don't mind. If you got something really long to say, I'll bring you in later. Blake, it's Jaffe. Go. What's up, man? Blake, where are you, Blake? Why have you abandoned me?
Hey.
Yes, what's up, baby? Go.
I'm here. Hold on. Let me mute your ass, bro. Okay, man.
Go.
No one was listening to you, but I was paying attention. Dynamic difficulty. I have an issue with it.
Go.
Okay. So first of all, dynamic difficulty does exist in some games already. So it is not some futuristic technology that you need to pray to the gods for.
Which game do you think has done it the most effectively?
The show.
Oh, MLB?
Yep.
I wasn't even aware it was in that game. How do they do it? Like, what do they change?
The default option in MLB The Show is dynamic difficulty, and it starts you at a specific setting, like All-Star or something like that. And then as you're playing the game, it'll automatically adjust your pitching difficulty and your batting difficulty to different levels separately, depending on how well you play the game.
Now, how do you know this? Did the game tell you this? Did you talk to someone? How is that sliding difficulty under the hood presented to the player?
They give you essentially just a box of text to read, when you're first learning to play the game. There's an intro tutorial usually when you're playing MLB The Show, and that's one of the options that they present to you, and they recommend it as the default option. Okay, so how do you like it? It's fantastic. I think it works really good depending on the game. I'm not a huge fan of using it in every game, and I can give you an example as to why. And actually, I will use God of War 3 as an example. I remember some friends back in the day, arguing with me, saying, "Well, God of War is just a button masher," and I used to contest that with them, and I would say, "Well, it's not a button masher. It just depends on how you play it. If you play it at a harder difficulty setting, then it's going to force you to use all of the abilities at your disposal, and you're going to learn how to play the game differently or properly, is just depending on how you think of it." And what I would find myself doing with a dynamic difficulty setting is I allow my skill set to drop, and I don't have a bar that I'm trying to achieve. You see what I'm saying? So, like, I get lazy, and then I become a worse player over time, and I don't realize that it's happening because there's not that bar that I'm setting out to achieve anymore.
I'm not sure I totally understand. You're saying that if you're playing a game with dynamic difficulty and you get lazy and the game misconstrues your laziness for being bad, then the game gets worse because it's not vibing with your play style.
And you start to play the game differently, right? Like, so essentially what I was saying, to turn that long story back to the beginning, is that a lot of games would become a button masher for me long term, because I would just start to zone out and start to play the game differently, and next thing you know, I'm just kind of spamming a couple of buttons. I think the problem is you're confusing what is currently thought of as easy mode as how the game would change if you sucked at it. That's why I keep saying everybody has their own version. Like, let's say God of War was meant to be in the dark blue, which is normal, which it was, right? Well, if my version of normal was I want to make sure people can't just spam on the buttons, even if the game is blue for you and your version of blue is different than my version of blue, that version of blue would still force you to play the game the way I want you to play it. Sliding dynamically under the hood to be easier doesn't mean that you can be lazy. It just means that it's not going to be so frustrating for you, but you still have to play the game. Yeah, but do you think you're going to use your abilities to the same extent, when you're not being forced to do so? If the game is just kind of adjusting down to your difficulty level, you're not going to really be forced to get any better at it, which I know to some people might not matter, but I think to a competitive audience that it does. And for example,
I think you guys are, even Darth Nugget says it's like dangling a carrot, Jaffe. You've got to have something to strive for. I think you guys are being very confused when I pitch this because of the history of what easy mode usually means. I am not proposing that if the game dynamically adjusts, you can get sloppy and lazy and not play it the way it was intended. I still would want there to be something to strive for in a carrot. It's just that the carrot that I'm actually capable of getting would be a different placement of the carrot than the carrot that Blake can get. That's all I'm fucking saying. And so if the difficulty is adjusting, I mean, take MLB. I mean, you have the most recent experience with it, at least compared to me. If you're saying it's fantastic, and you're playing it, I guess the question becomes, does the game, like, do you find yourself intentionally fucking up for a couple of innings to make sure the game becomes easier for you in the later innings so you can win? I mean, are you trying to game the system?
So what ends up happening is I'll play dynamic difficulty, and then I notice that over time I start to become a worse batter, right? And I don't know why that is. I think I just start to pay less attention to what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know why. And next thing you know, the difficulty level starts to drop, and it shows you whenever the difficulty level starts to drop on you. And the next thing you know, I go online to play somebody, and then it's set at a specific difficulty level, all pro or whatever, and then I start to play bad. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So,
I do. I think when you're talking multiplayer, it becomes a very different thing. I think if you're training to go online, you should turn off dynamic difficulty for sure.
Yeah.
But I
think having it as an option is a great thing, and I love to use it. As a matter of fact, I know a lot of people who think the show is too difficult, and I've recommended that setting to them, and they've ended up really enjoying the game. So I think it is a good option. I just think it should be just that, though, an option, as opposed to one specific playstyle.
I honestly think that has more to do with how good the algorithm can ever be. I mean, I think ultimately what you want is somebody puts the game in and they have the experience the director wanted. And if they are trying to game the system, ideally the system could recognize what you're doing and go, go fuck yourself. We're not going to let you do that. I mean, games, I remember even when we were doing Drawn to Death, we had to come up with solves for things like trophies, where it's like, if you run 1,000 feet or 1,000 hours or whatever, and TJ, one of our programmers, is like, well, I would just take a rubber band and I would push it up against the edge of the stick and go to bed, and I'd wake up and I'd have my trophy. I mean, there's all these little exploits you've got to sort of figure out. But, All right, Blake, thank you, buddy. I appreciate the call.
No worries.
All right, man. All right, let's bring in Swixtifer. That's interesting. Hang on, where'd he go? Swix. Am I saying your name right? Swixtifer, are you there, pal? What's up, bud? Swixtifer. Spazbo.
Hello.
Hey, man, what's going on?
Well, I wanted to talk about some dynamic difficulty.
Begin!
So, I mean, the only game that I can think of is like Resident Evil 4 and 5, which people have already tried to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they went into super depth with how it works exactly.
I think some people were talking about the enemy placements, number of enemies, hit points, pickups, things like that. So it seemed less, from what they explained in the chat, it seemed less sort of nuanced and more sort of battering. It probably still worked, but it seemed more battering ram solve.
Well, they didn't say like how it gets to be like that, did they?
I don't know. In terms of what triggers it, you mean?
Yeah, what triggers it and stuff.
No.
Like from what I heard from someone like a few years ago, they said it's like there's like a slider from like number 3 to 9, which is a weird analogy of number because it doesn't start at 1, but like the lowest difficulty is like a 3, but you start at like in the middle, like 5 or 6 or something.
Okay.
So the damage you take, or if you like miss your shots shooting enemies, or if you're just having a really tough time, the slider will go down, and it can only go down so far. But if it's like all the way at the bottom, that's when enemies aren't as aggressive. Some enemies don't spawn in certain rooms at specific locations.
Right. So how do you? Let me ask you this: how do you know about that?
Just well, from when I learned about it is like watching people speedrun the game. They would explain like, oh, I'm going to intentionally take damage here so that an enemy doesn't spawn over there.
Right. So, like, well, here's what I can tell you. I mean, I think that there would have to be a solve to prevent, unless the director was just like, fuck it, if you want to ruin the game, ruin the game. But I still think
that's what speedrunners do for games anyway, to kind
Right.
of ruin the game.
But I think there should ideally be ways to kind of recognize what the player's doing. But what I will tell you, when I played Resident Evil 4 online and I played it streaming, and I had never played it before then, and you guys, I don't know if you were on the chat or not, you guys were watching me, and I wasn't very good at it. But
I don't remember you playing Resident Evil 4.
yeah,
Anyway.
but boy, did I love that fucking game. So for me, what I can tell you is it must have worked for me because I love that game.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, for first-time players, the game never tells you about this. It's default like this on the normal difficulty. Because once you beat the game, you unlock professional, and professional actually keeps the slider all the way up, and it never goes down no matter what happens.
I think that's a great solve.
On normal difficulty, yeah, it could go up or down depending on how good you are, depending on if you've taken a certain amount of damage, how good or bad your accuracy is.
Right. I think the key thing would be, though, if you were to apply something like that to something like Bloodborne, it would still, my desire would still be to respect the vision of the creators and say that slider goes to 3 to 9, but if it's 3, I'm still having a hard time. But my 9 is your 3, and you know it, right? Because that's just, we're different players.
Some games, yeah. I mean, I also want to talk about I only beat Bloodborne once. I wanted to talk about my experience with that.
Okay.
In the beginning of the game, I was dying over and over again. Mainly, not even to the bosses. It's just getting to the boss was the main part for me. Once I finally got the level layout and then I could get to the boss, then I would, have to deal with the boss. And it wasn't until I found out the first boss on that bridge, that beast.
Yeah.
It was an optional boss. You didn't even have to go to it first because the first real boss is in another direction.
Yeah, I may go back and play Bloodborne. I mean, that's how much I love the world of Bloodborne. It's so fucking cool, and I love the character design that I'm so bad at it, but
it was for that reason. I loved the design of it, and everything looked so cool that it just because of that is why I actually kept going on with the game. Because normally in a game where I died that many times in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, forget it."
Yeah.
But I kept going because the setting looked so cool.
Right.
And until, halfway through the game is when I finally got getting good at some of it, but then there's this forest area that it was basically the beginning of the game all over again.
Gotcha.
I got past that,
I think I'll play it on stream and you can help me. I would appreciate it. All right, Spaz, thanks, buddy.
Well, hang on.
Why we gotta keep it moving, baby. You know what I'm thinking? Thinking we might do, though? You know what I'm thinking we might do? I might start doing a show twice a month where some of the key members come on and it's just a roundtable discussing the news. Because I know a lot of you guys have a lot to say, but in the call format, I think a lot of people are waiting to move on. So do one last point, though, and then I think we're gonna do that kind of roundtable a couple of times a month. But what was the last thing you wanted to talk about?
I wanted to say about how the game has a lot of optional areas that are actually really weird to get to, and on your first playthrough you would never have known unless getting help from a guide or someone telling you, oh, you have to do this to you have to do something weird to unlock a carriage that takes you to a special castle, and I think that whole castle is all optional, but it's there's so much in it, it's crazy how it's optional.
Right. Okay, well, show me that carriage the next time I play. I appreciate it, Spaz. Thanks, buddy.
You can get far.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay. All right, see you. All right, last call, then we're going to move on to talk about how Nintendo is walking towards a cliff. One moment. Let's bring in Raz, and then we're going to move on to talk about how Nintendo is heading towards a cliff, and we have to save them. Go, Raz Mataz. What's up, baby? Raz, where are you? I'm going to sing a song about you, or I'm going to bring in Rob the Mod. Rob the Mod, you wanted me to bring you in so you could tell me what?
What? Oh, I don't want. Oh, yeah. I want to tell you that you're full of doo-doo, sir.
Yeah, I have doo-doo in my soul.
You're full of doo-doo and not the S word, because my mama's listening. Right now.
Is she really? She probably is.
She is listening right now, and she says, you don't say that S word, and I raised you better.
Listen to me. Is she listening on her own computer or she's in the room?
She is asleep right now.
Oh, fuck that
She
old,
is sleeping
fuck
right now.
that old biddy.
She is a 64-year-old. I don't know how old she is actually. That should
Dude.
be pretty good. That's pretty sad. I don't know.
Well, you know, all I can tell you is,
Hey, we all know. We all get older.
yeah, no, we do. All right, Rob, thanks, buddy. I'm going to try to bring in
All right, man.
Raz, man. Raz, are you there? Otherwise, I'm moving on. I'm going to give you, no, hang on. Raz, are you there?
Oh.
Yeah, what's up?
All right, yeah. I just want to talk about the whole scalable AI thing.
Okay, keep it quick if you don't mind, because we've hammered it to death. We got to move on.
Yeah, no. I just want to say real quick that if you did do scalable AI specifically in the Dark Souls or the Demon Souls series,
Yeah,
you'd be doing nothing but handicapping yourself.
explain that. I don't understand.
Well, you're coming at it with the approach that the Souls games are a strictly single-player game. The problem is that Souls relies on a huge mechanic inside the game called invading. So you having a scalable AI, when someone invades your world, are they playing in your world with your AI scale?
Yes.
Because at that point,
Well, no. And that basically, again, I'm speaking in the ideal way that I would ask the programmers to create the algorithm. What I would do is I would say, okay, I need to be in the red zone. Ideally, when they're attacking enemies, those enemies are the red zone for them. But you know, I would always tune the game with the dynamic difficulty for the player who is actually the main player that has been invaded. But yeah, it would be a new challenge you would have to have the dynamic difficulty deal with for sure.
All right, so when someone invades you, are they scaled down for your
When they invade to attack me or help me?
attack you?
That's a great question. I mean, okay, I'm not the designer. The real answer is whatever the designers want from the game. But if it were me, yeah, here's what I would say. I would probably say, what do I want out of that? Do I want the player to experience anyone can invade me at any difficulty level, and that is part of the fun? Then I would not scale it. But if the goal is, no, I want everybody who gets invaded to have a fighting chance, no matter their difficulty, then I would scale it. I think it totally has to do with sort of what the intent is behind the mechanic.
Well, see, the reason I bring that up is because one of the biggest difficulty spikes in Dark Souls, and the game is balanced around it, is the fact that they expect other players to invade you. Like I was telling Rob about this earlier in the Discord.
Yeah.
But in the Bloodborne game, there's an area called the Nightmare Frontier. I'm not sure if you reached that or not. But the Nightmare Frontier, the moment you spawn in, there's a bell toll lady. And back when the game was popular, when you would go into that area, you would immediately be invaded.
Right.
Like that was the invasion spot.
Yeah, again, I get it. You get your ass kicked, right?
Constantly.
Right.
Like no matter what.
And
you
if that
lose your soul every time you got there.
But if that's what the designer wants to happen to most people, then I wouldn't fuck with the difficulty. I'm saying I think you can tune the dynamic difficulty algorithm based on what the goal is of the section of the game.
All right, so you want to base it on the section of the game.
I want to base it on what the director wants. So if I was directing the game, I would say, okay, when I go into the Nightmare Realm and the lady rings the bell, this is the kind of experience I want players to have. And based on that, I would say, okay, that means this is how we tune the difficulty, the dynamic difficulty.
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm saying, is with the dynamic difficulty, you're also adding invasions to the mix. It'll get to the point where you'll run into the exact same problem why the dynamic difficulty was put in there in the first place. It's the fact that the game's too hard for certain players.
Not if the designer wants that section of invasion areas or whenever someone invades to keep you in the red and not become too hard and just hard enough. Then you do adjust the difficulty.
Well, that's the point I'm trying to make. When it comes to Dark Souls games, the only way you're not being invaded in certain areas, well, at least in Dark Souls case specifically, is when you're not embered. If you're embered, it doesn't matter where you are unless you're literally in a boss room or in the Firelink Shrine. Someone can invade you.
Okay. So what's your point, though? So what?
My point being is that by dropping the difficulty down based on how well or how good you do, you're purposely well, not even purposely, the game is doing it for you. The game is handicapping you just to basically be free meat for players that have a higher difficulty setting. And I would say matchmaking could fix these things, but even with Call of Duty skill-based matchmaking, you can go in there, tank a bunch of matches, and you'll get nothing but easy matches for a while.
Yeah, I don't even know if you'd need to solve it with matchmaking. I think you'd need to solve it by tuning the people who invade you. If people who invade are supposed to give the player a certain experience, then the variables on the people who are invading can be shifted dynamically to allow the player who's invaded to have that experience.
All right, so you want to scale the invading person down to the, how can I put it, to the skill level of the person being invaded?
I don't even look at it like up or down, but yes, I look at it like if you wanted the guy who's being invaded to have a really hard time, and the algorithm identified a really hard time as what you would consider a really hard time for you, then yeah, the people who are attacking you and invading you would have certain stats adjusted on the fly to allow that to occur to the player who's invaded. Yeah.
When it comes to that topic, I will agree to disagree, because even though their stats are tanked down,
yeah,
a parry's still a parry, if you get what I mean there.
Okay, well, I don't want to get too in the weeds on it right now, but I mean, a parry's still a parry, but sometimes a parry can knock the enemy back. Sometimes the parry can knock the enemy back and they drop an item. Sometimes the parry can stagger the enemy for a little bit longer than another parry. Those are all things that are easily added to a dynamic difficulty scaler, right?
Not exactly, because the way Dark Souls work, you get a parry, that's automatic big damage, and there are parry gods out there. When I say god, I've never seen them miss a parry in my life.
Okay, but the big damage is tunable, right?
The big damage is tunable to the point where you could probably not get one shot, and you could make them even. But at the end of the day, if someone's better than you at the game, they're just better than you at the game, if you get what I'm saying.
Sure. But, I mean, again, I hear you, but I don't think that necessarily. I mean, because what you're arguing, you know, in the chat, Frosty says, this sounds like magical thinking. If we had perfect AI, why wouldn't we use it? Perhaps it doesn't exist. The problem is it's not either or, right? So ultimately what I am arguing for is working towards an AI that allows the game to give every player the experience the director wants, regardless of the skill level of the player. So are there going to be gotchas and anomalies? Sure, we'll have to figure them out. But, you know, I'll give you guys a little insight into working in video games. There's all, and these are great people to have on your team. They drive you up the fucking wall, but you need them, which is whenever a designer brings something up, it's like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And it's like, it doesn't mean the idea doesn't work. It means, oh yeah, that's a good thing we have to solve. So I'm not saying you're not bringing up some good points, but I don't think it kills the situation. It's just something, you know, kind of like with MLB The Show that has dynamic difficulty. I'm sure there were a number of things that were like, oh shit, if we do dynamic difficulty, how do we deal with XYZ? And that went on the list of something we got to solve. All right, man, I appreciate the call. I'll talk to you soon. All right, I am going to move on to some other topics. All right. Scott says the guy is getting way too caught up in the details, as though everything Jaffe's saying has to be solved right now. Yeah, I mean, it's going to take some time, but that's my plan. That's my goal. That's what I'm proposing, and I think will be good. All right, fellas, let us move on. We are going to talk about. Well, goddamn, we talked that fucker to death, didn't we? Hang on a minute. I'll save that for tomorrow. Let's talk a little bit about Ubisoft. Right, Armin. Constructive problems push the game forward. Anything, yeah. Conflict and things that aren't working. There's good people. That's how you get a lot of shit. Fat Boo wanted to ask a simple question. Oh, well, I don't know where he went. Okay, he can come back in if it's a fast one, but okay, I want to talk about Ubisoft real quick, and I just want to bring this up because why are you excited, Morgan? Morgan says, did you guys see the Team Ninja is making a Three Kingdoms game? I don't know what that is. A Three Kingdoms? What's a Three Kingdoms game? Okay, anyway. So Ubisoft, you guys know Ubisoft had a bunch of, there are executives that do a bunch of, sexy time assault and all that kind of crap. And about a year ago, they were like, oh, it was very toxic. Some of the executives got fired. Some of the executives got pushed away. Chill, Diego. Good to see you, buddy. But there have been a number of, union groups and various groups saying, hey, you guys haven't really done anything to help the situation. Did I just freeze? I probably just froze. Hang on. And, hang on. Okay, I think I froze, right? This should fix it. Test. Yeah, it's still working. Okay. So what happened is, let me get the camera back up. Sorry, fellas. Okay. So what happened is this group within Ubisoft, they call themselves A Better Ubisoft. They filled out a petition that says, you disappoint us, Mr. Guillemont, who's the CEO. It's been 100 days and you haven't met our demands yet. And then just to give you a quick update, here are the list of the demands. Number 1, stop promoting and moving known sexual offenders and toxic offenders from studio to studio, team to team with no repercussions. This cycle needs to end. Number 2, we want a collective seat at the table to have a meaningful say in how Ubisoft as a company moves forward from here. Number 3, cross-industry collaboration to agree on a set of ground rules and processes that all studios can use to handle these offenses in the future. And number 4, they want collaboration must be heavily involving employees and non-management positions and union representatives. Okay. And they're saying, hey, it's been 100 days since we gave you this and you haven't done anything. And so then they put out this new petition, and now they're saying it's not just for Ubisoft employees to sign. Anybody who's with us in this fight should sign it. Okay. And I want to ask the chat, because this confuses me a little bit. I understand that good jobs are hard to come by. I understand that, okay? Although these days, apparently, they're not as hard as they used to be. But what is this mentality of staying at a job that treats you like shit, and then when they tell you they're going to stop treating you like shit, you stay and you go, you know what we should do? Let's get a petition going. Like, that's look, newsflash, A Better Ubisoft. If these guys haven't changed, they're not going to change. You need to go somewhere else. You need to be putting your resume out there, right? Let me tell you why they're not going to change, though. This is the petition. You can sign it if you want to. Their last revenue, or their last earnings call, Assassin's Creed Valhalla 2 is the second largest profit generator in the history of Ubisoft. Far Cry 6's early sales are in line with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and the average playtime per player on Far Cry 6 is 25% higher than Far Cry 5. If you're Ubisoft, the gamers don't give a fuck. And if you're working at Ubisoft, you must recognize, why would they change? Now, they did recently start giving a bunch of raises to people, because a number of places where they're at there's a lot more competition now. But even that, the employees are saying that these emergency pay raises are going to the high-end executives, and they're not going to the junior developers. Petitions are the American way, says Zaf. Look how people get out petitions for changes in games and movies. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. right? So I guess the point is, my question to you guys is, when I look at this, if you were working at Ubisoft, wouldn't you just pack up and start looking for another job? I mean, you're literally working for a company. I mean, think about the psychology that this Guillemot must be, if what they're saying is true and he's not doing anything. You're working for a guy that for a decade has allowed this toxicity to fester and grow and be acceptable in his company. And then when everyone calls him on it, the news calls him on it, it's made public. He then does a couple of things for a couple of weeks, months, and then according to 4 or 5 different sources in terms of like a union group, there's a lawsuit happening that they're not doing anything. They're not doing anything. So if you're working there, isn't the proper healthy response to go, I think it's time to leave? Because this is like Tina Turner. Or for kids today, this is like Rihanna going, could I please get a petition signed so Chris Brown stops hitting me? And it's like, what's that going to do? You think Guillemot is going to go, oh, well, I was going to just sit on my ass. But now that I've, seen the petition, I think I better do my job. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something, because I don't want to be callous. People need jobs. People are in good jobs. Not everybody can just quit. But isn't there a point after 100 days that even if you don't have a plan to quit, the writing's on the wall, right? They're not going to do anything. They're not going to do anything because it's not hurting the bottom line. The gamers don't give a fuck, which, whether they should or not is a different question, but they don't give a fuck. So the executives don't give a fuck. And the people who are getting the pay raises are the people that are like, look, we can't, these are harder guys to replace. It's senior talent. So yeah, we're the CFO, CTO, absolutely, we'll bump you up. But the juniors, we can replace them in 5 seconds. This is why remember I got in trouble? You guys remember I got in trouble a while back when I said QA is easily replaceable? Everybody got mad at me. Oh, Jeff, and I wasn't saying QA is not important. I wasn't saying QA is not incredibly valuable. I wasn't saying that QA doesn't add great value to the in-game product. Of course they do. And it's a great entry-level job. But they are also easily replaceable in the sense that there's a lot of people who want their foot in the door. And yes, you'll lose some talent that could have gone on to do great things. But I think these companies would rather carry on with their, evil ways than worry about losing somebody who might have one day become a great producer. Maybe they will leave, says Mr. Rob, if the petition doesn't work. I mean, maybe, sure. I mean, I'm sure everybody's got their line in the sand where when they say, okay, this is enough is enough. Zav says, I've worked at well-paying jobs that treated me like shit. Guess what I did? I left when I could. Right, exactly. QA says Brian's a valuable asset, but it's a revolving door due to the conditions. Well, it's also a revolving door because it's, look, I will agree and I will acquiesce that there are QA roles that are more specialized than they used to be when I was in QA, or even 4 years ago when I was making games and the roles were a little bit more spread out. Like this guy could test weapons and then he could test level layout and all that stuff. Absolutely. But that said, though, it's still on the whole an entry-level job. They can easily find more people for grunt work, says Eddie Wright. And that's not a disrespect. That's just, one of the things you have to accept in life, I think, in the world of businesses, if you do want to succeed and get ahead, is it's not you leave your emotions at the door. It's okay to be emotional about things, especially creative work. But you got to also be realistic and understand where you sit on the pecking order at any given moment. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you have no value. But yeah, you're an easier person to replace at that level than a lot of other people at the company. Raz says they'll lay off 300 people, then give the CEO a meager $12 million bonus for his poor performance. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly true. So anyway, it sounds like nobody is I feel for these guys and ladies emotionally. Of course I do. But I'm not, sure, I could run out and sign the petition. Why not? But what's it really going to do? Ubisoft is like, dude, what are you talking about? We're making so much fucking money. People love our shit. Do you see how much money we made off Valhalla? What I would advise is quit. Start your own goddamn thing. All right, let's talk about something here. I want to tell you guys real quick about something very important and near and dear to my heart, and then we're going to talk about Nintendo heading towards a cliff. And I know you're going to think it's hyperbolic. It's not. I have stats. I have charts. I come prepared. Let me just settle, though, because we've been talking for a while. If you're listening to this and you're driving in your car, I hope you drive safe. I'm teaching my oldest kid to drive right now. Oh, my God. It's scary. We hired somebody to take her driving because I'm just like, fuck this shit. This is too terrifying for me. I'll lose a year of my life every time I get behind the wheel. She's a good driver, but terrifying. Terrifying as shit. Goodness gracious. Okay. I'm taking a break. I'm taking a little break, that's all. All right, I want to talk about Nintendo real quick. Listen to this. This is interesting to me. Now, you may have seen this. This came out a couple of days ago, but and look, I used to love Nintendo. Okay, I used to be a total Nintendo fanboy. Loved the fucking company. They could do no wrong. And I think still Miyamoto is one of the greatest designers ever to have walked the planet. He's given so much to the industry. Okay, I don't really consider Nintendo. They're not Blizzard in that they've fallen from grace, but they're kind of at a point where, for me, they aren't what they were even 10 years ago. There's just the magic seems a little bit gone at the moment, and that's okay. I mean, it happens, and maybe they'll get it back, maybe they won't. I don't fucking know. But here's what's interesting. So this stat comes out the other day, and I just thought this was really interesting as it relates to their future. You may have seen this. Current state of the Nintendo Switch. The age distribution of annual playing users. The vast majority of people who play Nintendo at this point are 20 to 30 years old. Up until that point, you got a pretty good stair step going up until you get to about age 10. It drops off when you're a teenager. You hit your nostalgia peak when you're in your 20s to 30, and then it starts to drop again. Okay, that's kind of, and you've seen this. This actually happened even 10 years ago. This was 10 years ago when they had a different graph where first through 6th grade, it was pretty good. And then junior high and high school, it dropped a little bit, and it started to go back up when you're 19 in your 20s and then it drops again. That's what they do. That's what they fucking do. It seems consistent. Here's another one from this is just specifically to Pokemon, but it's consistent. And so I want to show you this because this is this is okay. Sorry. So I want to show you this. Okay. This is what I think is happening and why I do think they're kind of headed for a bit of a tumble if they don't kind of figure out what the fuck is going on, okay? If you go back to the chart that I showed you, which is the age distribution, if you go back 20 years ago and 10 years ago even, what you did not have, you still had this drop-off where teens were playing Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto and more violent things and all that stuff. But you had a group of kids that came up and loved Nintendo, and that love in this trough, there was nothing to replace it. So when they got into their 20s and 30s, there was that nostalgia there. Zaf says, I lived through the nostalgic peak, which is why I find it weird when adults in their 40s get defensive about Nintendo. Right. Well, here's what's weird now. So if you look at what's happened in just the last 10 years, this trough has gotten filled in with games. Nintendo's never had to compete with, and let me tell you the games that trough is playing and also the younger kids are playing now. I pulled some. Rocket League, The Sims 4, Minecraft, Roblox, Jackbox Party, Fortnite. The vast majority of these are free, and they're on every fucking system, okay? So the new seeds of nostalgia are being planted that in 10 years from now, this peak is probably not going to be what it once was and what it is today. Because ultimately, this peak exists because if you go back 10 years or 20 years for the people in this gap or in this chunk right here, you've got the only game in town for them when they were little kids and coming up. If they weren't playing adult games, you had stuff like, Pokemon. You had stuff like Splatoon on the Wii. You had stuff like the Zelda games, Mario. Now, no kids I know above the age of 10, and I know a good number because of my kids, they're not playing those things that much. It's older people, and the other kids are playing this shit. They're playing the Fortnites, the Rocket Leagues, the Sims 4, Roblox. Roblox just came up with like 40% growth this quarter. And even if you look at Pokemon, these are sales from Pokemon from the very beginning. This is on a downward trajectory as well, right? If you look at again, these are spread across years, but even if you just look at the recent ones, 13 million on the last Switch one, 14 million, 9 million, 22 million for Sword and Shield, right? That's spread across two. It's definitely not what it was, and I think a lot of it does have to do with this gap of around age 9 to around age 19 having a lot more competition that Nintendo's never had to deal with before. And everyone's got cell phones. A lot of these games are free. All their friends can play each other cross-play. And I really do wonder when I saw this the other day when they released this, I really do wonder if I don't think any company's best days are behind them in the sense that anyone can turn something around. If you look at a company like Netflix, if you look at a company like McDonald's, if you look at a company like Disney, there is a lot of there are a lot of stories of companies that have kind of pivoted and become bigger than they ever fucking were. But I think if you don't do something in your Nintendo, I don't think you're ever going to be... I think this is kind of the swan song. Because they're not... It's like comic books, right? I mean, comic books sell great now if you're in Barnes & Noble and you're a kid buying manga. But who goes and buys... Even superhero graphic novels are the least selling at Barnes & Noble. Right? Because the industry did a terrible job of bringing new people in. So most people reading comics today, like traditional comic books and superheroes, are guys my age, a little older, a little younger. But my kids and their friends and younger and a little older, nobody's reading fucking comic books. And so I wonder, part of it's their online shit. Their online shit is terrible. It's very difficult to get online. Part of it is, I think, tonally, it reminds me when we made Mickey Mania, we were like, we have Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is the most, popular character in the world. We're going to make so much money. This is going to be so fucking great. But what we didn't realize is Mickey Mouse appeals to like anybody unless you're a parent or you're a kid under the age of 6, Mickey Mouse ain't for you. And that year, we got clobbered by Earthworm Jim, Donkey Kong Country, and there was one other one that had a little bit more attitude and edge. Everybody bought those. Nobody bought ours, even though ours had great reviews, better reviews than like Earthworm Jim. So I think that this Nintendo also has, I look at something like Metroid, okay? Metroid is, Eddie T, I'm not disagreeing with that. Right now, yes. Here's what's interesting though. So Eddie says the Switch is still selling incredibly well. In old games like Mario Kart 8 still top the charts. Well, yeah, but look at this stat here. Let me see if I have this. This was really... I'm not going to get into comics with you guys. I don't agree that most comics are trash. I know some people think that, but regardless, though, the comic industry made more money this year than the last 4 years. It's even with the pandemic. It's more of an issue, though, of which comics are really selling. But I want to show you this. this stat was really interesting to me, because you're talking about Mario Kart selling really well, which obviously it does. But if you look at the number of copies that Animal Crossing sold, and that was like their biggest fucking hit. Animal Crossing sold, I think it's at 31 million units is what Animal Crossing has sold, which is amazing. But if you look at the daily active users on Roblox, it's so 31 million sold across a year now, for the most part. 31 million across a year compared to 60 million a day, right? Roblox gets 60 million a day playing that game. I think they said there was like 300 and something million monthly active users, or if I might be missing the numbers a little bit, but it's pretty fucking close. It was double what Animal Crossing sold. So it's not Eddie T that I disagree that, yes, of course, Nintendo is still selling really well. Of course, and Mario Kart 8 is fucking awesome. It's probably one of the best. It's definitely one of the best racers I've ever played. The track design is brilliant. I'm not shitting on Nintendo. I'm just saying that, you know, the kids today, you know, in this group, this little group down here, yeah, they're playing it. But, you know, the teenagers and the, you know, 8 to 19, they're playing it, but they're not playing it as much as these other games. And so if what's true is this little bump is huge because of nostalgia, that's all I'm fucking saying, is that nostalgia seeds are beginning to be less potent. And I wonder what's going to happen 10 years from now. 10 years from now, I can tell you my kids and their friends are going to be nostalgic for Minecraft and Fortnite and Roblox. They're not going to be sitting around going, oh, I'm super nostalgic for Mario Odyssey, right? I don't see it. I don't see it from their friends. I don't see it from the stats that are just, you know, numerical. So, you know, we'll see. Someone said, where did that go? Hang on one second. These people that don't play games that know who Kratos is. There's people who don't play games that know who Kratos is. Well, yeah, well, what I was going to say is, I think part of it's the online experience is shit. I think part of it is, I think they need, I know this is going to sound blasphemous, and I'm not one of these guys that think Nintendo doesn't do new IP. I know they don't do new IP, but their games, the games with Mario are very, very different, and ARMS was new and stuff like that, but I think they need to step away a little bit from the kiddie stuff, at least with some of their brands. Like, take Metroid. I mean, I'm not saying Nintendo needs to go M-rated. That would be kind of ridiculous. It's not who they are. Just like you're not going to see an R-rated movie on Disney+. They put that on Hulu. But do I think you could take Metroid and go, you know what? I get it, hardcore gamers. Enjoy that. It's 2.5D. We'll make those when we can. But Metroid at this point, you've basically got Nintendo's version of Aliens, right? You could make a much more relevant thematic thing out of Metroid. You could take Zelda, which I love. Zelda's one of my favorite franchises, and you could age that up a little bit so it's a little less soft. It's a little more sort of anime or manga or action. I'm not saying add blood and decapitations and all that, but it just seems that playing to this 5 to 10-year-old little kid audience, it just, I don't know. It just, no one's, you know, unless you want to build your whole business around, we play to the 5 to 10-year-olds, and then when they get older, we have the nostalgia factor and we have the parents. Okay, fine. But even Disney that does that supplements that with Marvel and Star Wars and some of their like Disney Channel tween girl shows. The reason Bob Iger went out and bought Star Wars and bought Marvel was he said we had too many properties that appealed mostly to little girls, and we weren't growing the audience. We weren't creating things for people to want to come to Disneyland and buy our products, because once they aged out, they never came back until they were parents. I think people got mad at me. I was talking to Hip Hop Gamer about 3 years ago. He did an interview with me. I think the best goddamn thing that could happen to Nintendo is Disney buys them. I know, don't fucking throw cabbage at the screen. But I agree. The best thing that can happen to them is Disney steps in and says, you know, we're gonna buy you and we want to take your brands and we want to, you know, push them to be much more powerful, much more not relatable, what's the word? Resonant across the globe. I'm not saying Link has to be edgy. I'm just saying that you've got kids coming up watching anime. I just told you, if you go look at the stats on if you look at the stats on what comics are selling, it's Dragon Ball, it's all this kind of crazy action and all this shit. And then you see Zelda and it's great, but you know, it's soft, you know, it doesn't really connect to where they need to be connecting to get this gap pushed up. Jaffe's right though, Nintendo investors aren't happy. Look at the stock price. Neil, I don't know what the stock price is. Can you share that? I wasn't looking at that. Eddie says it's bad enough Disney owns The Simpsons. They would turn Nintendo into absolute garbage. Okay, I understand. Disney, when I say Disney, I mean a company that comes in that says, we understand brands, we understand how to grow brands, we think we could give a shot of adrenaline. If you look at this chart and you feel that Eddie T, that Nintendo is in a great position, I don't mean today, but I mean moving forward. If you think, no man, it's totally great, in 10 years, the kids who are down here, even though most of them are playing Fortnite and Minecraft, they're going to be nostalgic for Splatoon and ARMS. Okay, you could be right, but I that would be. And again, just because it's news to me doesn't mean it's not accurate. But that would be, as a guy who has raised children from birth up to currently 16 and 18, that would be surprising. Because we're one of the places that all the kids come to after school and on weekends. We just had a kid here for 3 days, right? This is not what they're talking about. They're playing Jackbox and Minecraft and Among Us and all that shit. And, you know, what they were playing last night was Towerfall, which did my heart good. Okay, Neil says it's stagnant. Nintendo stock is stagnant. There's no growth. And again, I'm not shitting on Nintendo. This is the problem. You can't do any. You can't even have a conversation with people because it gets so defensive. I can't watch modern anime, says Zaf. I do like classics like Ghost, Ninja Scroll, Kira. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's my take on Nintendo. That's what I'm thinking. I was surprised. I was very surprised when this came out though. Because this doesn't bode well. In my opinion, if I was Nintendo, I would be very worried. I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I know Switch has done great, but it's like the kids are on the fucking cell phones, man. You know, the kids are on the tablets. That's where they are. I know people are buying Switches in big numbers, and you can't scoff at that, but it's these people. It's because of nostalgia, and it's little kids. You got to get them while they're young, man. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at these numbers. I don't think that an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old is going to grow up with a nostalgia love for ARMS. I just don't see it. We'll see. Okay. They do have games that appeal to adults, but most are third-party exclusives. Oh, on the Switch. No, I know. I'm not saying I have a Switch. I'm not saying the Switch is a bad piece of hardware. I'm just saying that I think they're leaving out the market where they need to be planting seeds of passion and nostalgia. I'll tell you one more thing about this, not Nintendo, but Microsoft and Sony. So this is interesting to me. I thought, I saw this story, Forza Horizon 5, which will be out here in a couple of minutes. Forza Horizon 5 has not released, but they are already 800,000 people playing it, was the story. So although you can now actually play Forza even when it hasn't released if you switch your thing to New Zealand. But anyway, and so you look at this and you say, wow, the reviews on this are phenomenal. And you say, wow, the Halo beta was great. If the actual Halo game that drops is also excellent, this is going to be a hell of a Christmas for Game Pass and Microsoft, right? But then you go... And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, haven't they said that they are going to be announcing more games or they're going to have some event in December? Because as I'm looking at this, I'm going, okay, but what is next for these guys? The only thing on the horizon that's really been dated is there's like a vampire co-op shooter from Arcane Studios, right? But it's like, Sony actually has the better 2022 at least announced, where you've got GT, you've got Horizon, and you've got God of War all in the first handful of months. And I'm assuming they'll have some stuff around the fall as well that we haven't really heard of. So I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I was looking it up and I can't really find what these guys have coming out outside of Christmas. So it's like, yeah, you might get a Xbox for Christmas and you might get Game Pass, but I wonder, when are they going to be able to start dropping big releases as frequently as they promise? Because I think this is going to be, you're going to see a big blip, and then you're going to see a number of people kind of going, okay, I played a bunch of Forza, I played a bunch of Halo, I'm moving on until something else comes along. Peapod says they've been talking about announcing games for 7 years. It is a little weird. I mean, Sony is also, we don't know what comes after God of War for the most part, which is a little weird, but they're working on stuff. And obviously these guys are working on stuff, but if you actually go look at, this is really weird. The 10 upcoming Xbox console exclusives, not coming to PS5 though, but if you look at a bunch of these, like Fable 4, who the fuck knows? And I don't think Fable 4 is really that big of a game anyway for most people. State of Decay 3 is not, again, I'm not saying it doesn't have its fans. I know people who work on it. I think clearly it's a good game, but it's not in the zeitgeist. It's not the big thing people are excited for. Obviously, Starfield is going to be big if it delivers. Shredders, who gives a shit? Crossfire, who gives a shit? Redfall, maybe. That's the vampire thing. Warhammer 40k Darktide, who gives a shit? And then Hellblade 2 is a niche title to begin with, and it's TBA. And then Stalker 2, nobody cares. So it's just weird. You'd think there would be, what are some of you guys, what are some of your teams working on that will be out in 2022 that would motivate people to go Xbox this Christmas versus Sony? If I had to choose one, that would be so hard at this point. That would be so fucking hard at this point, because I think Game Pass is so great. And I love all the games on Game Pass that a lot of hardcore gamers like, fuck that. But I love that shit. So I think I'd probably still go Xbox, but man, the frequency of exclusives that are great on PS5, it's just, Microsoft needs to announce what's coming, man. You were pumped on Darktide? What is Darktide? Fable 4 is going to be a test on how Microsoft can manage studios. I just don't think Fable 4 anybody gives a shit about. So Perfect Dark is not 2022, as far as we know, nor is Indiana Jones. Okay. Is that what that is? I'm still kind of pumped on it then. That looks pretty good. Okay, I know what that is now. I didn't know what it was. That was just another Warhammer thing. I don't think Perfect Dark will be canceled now because Crystal Dynamics is pretty much involved. I think you'll basically, I do believe after what the president of Square said the other day, it would not surprise me if Microsoft does end up owning that particular dev group and Square sells it to them. Because Square, the president came out the other day and literally said, we're all in on games as a service, and the Crystal guys, that's really not kind of a good fit for them. And now they're working with Microsoft on Perfect Dark. I would not surprise me if Microsoft didn't come in and say, okay, we'll pay you guys a shit ton of money to make this an exclusive Microsoft studio, and we want a 2-year, 5-year, whatever exclusive on Lara Croft that goes with it. I could see that. The Lies of Pi. Yeah, it does look very good, Andreas. Okay. I agree. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to save all these other stories. We talked a long time about Nintendo, and we talked a long time about wait a minute. I gotta deal with this guy in the chat over on Discord. Feel the Force says Jaffe doesn't seem to be the most well-knowing on Xbox because he would know that Fable is Microsoft's flagship RPG. No, it's not that I don't know what Fable is. Where he says it's like Final Fantasy on PlayStation or Fire Emblem or Pokemon on Nintendo. No, it's not. It's positioned to be that. Okay, but let's look at the sales. How many copies Fable sold? Okay. And they do have a partnership with Sega. That's true. Oh, I don't think Beyond Good and Evil is ever going to come out. Legends. Fable 2 sold 3.5 million copies. Fable 3 sold 3 million copies. This is not Pokemon, which is sold, I think we talked earlier, the last Pokemon, which was 2019, sold 22 million copies. Final Fantasy, take your pick, but it's definitely over 3.5. So I don't disagree with you, Feel the Force, that that Fable is positioned to be that for Microsoft, but I don't think anybody's looking at Fable unless maybe the team is making it and they know they're onto something. I don't think anyone's looking at Fable going, oh my God, I cannot fucking wait for the next Fable. There's some people, but I don't think, yeah, right. Eddie says that's like saying Crackdown is Microsoft's flagship open world game. Yeah, it seems a little off, but maybe this will be the time they turn it around though. Maybe it'll become something big. But again, I mean, it just seems weird to me that there's not a lot more games announced. Let me tell you one more quick thing. I want to get your opinion on this. I'm a little confused by this. Okay, these numbers came out. A guy named Pyro, who follows me, hit me up and said, "Hey Jaffe, here are numbers from the PC versions of Sony games." I'm like, oh, okay. And they're pretty low, man. 1.3 million for Horizon, 1.5 for Days Gone, 1.6 for Death Stranding. And again, that's good, I guess, for a PC game, but it does make you wonder. Because now Sony is working with a new PC port house for God of War, Ragnarok, or God of War, as far as we know. And they just acquired one of the biggest PC port houses. So they're in, right? They're all in. But it's like, I don't know, I would have thought if you are going to maybe risk some sales of your hardware, then you have to kind of question, okay, what's the upside if you're only selling less than 2 million for each one of these? I don't know. I'm just very curious. I like it. I like that more people get to play PlayStation games, but, well, yeah, Matt says check the Pirate Bay numbers, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, that certainly isn't to Sony's advantage that if they go to this hardware, a PC, yeah, what are they, Matt? I don't go to Pirate Bay, but my guess would be, Days Gone or Death Stranding is probably, 8 million would be the number for that. I'm just guessing. Maybe it's a lot higher, but I would say 8 million. But yeah, that would be another reason. So your shit's getting pirated. You're not selling that many. You're hurting a little bit. Not a lot, maybe, but a little bit of your hardware sales. When I see these numbers, it does makes me rethink why they are all in with this. Isn't a large portion of that gravy for Sony? How expensive is it to port a game? Caveman, well, that's the thing. It is gravy, but they're going all in on the gravy. And then the question becomes, what are they giving up for it? Like, before it was like, look, if they're going to sell enough copies that they can fund new games and all that shit, awesome. Or Zaf says it's like a side hustle. But aren't they risking some hardware sales because of it? Aren't they risking piracy because of it? Like, is 1.3 million for a company the size of Sony really worth it? I mean, it might be. I don't know. Maybe you guys are saying it's side hustle and it's a little bit of money. It's, let's see, 1.3 and you make off $60. No, it's $50 game. So Sony makes 30% retail. I don't know where you buy these. Steam makes 30. I don't know what you make. Let's just say you make $30, right? So you're making $30 million. No, you're making 30, depending on what, let's say 1.5. So you're making $40 million. I mean, that's good. I guess it's good. I guess that's not, fuck you money, but it's good. If they can port in-house, I can't imagine the deal being that bad. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think piracy is to blame. Capcom serves as an example of a company changing focus to PC, even with that consideration. Plus, why would they be concerned about piracy in last-gen games? Well, I don't know. I'm just saying that. Do you think this is worth it? But maybe they're kind of going, look, man, we just made, give or take, $100 million on these games, 3 of them, and it only cost us $40 million to make them. Sure, why not? They won't lose that many consoles just because you can eventually get the game on PC. I'm sure they researched it. No, I'm sure they did, Caveman. And that was always my logic as well when people brought this up as a bad thing, which I still don't think it is. I guess I always assumed the numbers would be more substantial to go into this market. Like they would look at it and go, holy shit, man. We're selling like 4 million, 5 million on PC after we've sold 10 million on console. But who knows? Maybe I don't know. All right, fellas. Woo-wee, we did it. That was a good, fun conversation. I hope you guys had a good time. I like talking video games with you ragamuffins. Makes me very happy. I want to tell you something. I will be back maybe tonight streaming some Forza. Well, here's Death Saw. Let me bring in Death Saw real quick. Hang on. Let me get him in. You never know. He could be the greatest caller in the world, and I will regret not having talked to him. Death Saw, what's up?
How's it going? Hey, Jeffy and Chad.
It's good.
Everything's going good.
What's up?
2 topics. Pretty much a little bit of expansion off of the earlier debate about Soulsborne needing difficulty modes.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, my take is everyone's focusing on getting easy mode, but wouldn't they theoretically get a hard mode? And then, based off of games like RuneScape, there would be certain modifiers like Iron Man, Hardcore Iron Man, where you'd be able to make the difficulty even greater, maybe theoretically. So maybe that would be enjoyable by the Souls fans. You think?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I imagine if they were doing a more traditional let the player choose the mode, then yeah, I imagine Souls fans would probably go. They probably still wouldn't like it, but they would be more open to modes being added that make the game harder versus than easier. I would agree with that probably.
Understood. But I'm just thinking that overall, I'm thinking more modes doesn't really hurt anybody. I mean, it's optional. You can pick and choose, and also if you can sort of pick and choose to your specific modifier of what you'd want out of a game, maybe that would be hard to ascertain before you play it, but ultimately giving people more chances and being able to back and forth their own content, and complete it on their own way. I understand that maybe people would be like, oh, well, there's the one way to complete it, but if there's multiple ways, then maybe that'd be more of a way to go.
I mean, I don't tend to agree with that, only because I think, if you apply that to any other art form, maybe for me it becomes even more apparent that it doesn't work. It would be like, I really like horror movies, but I don't like the gore. Okay, I'll watch the version that doesn't have the gore. It's like, okay, that works and that person may enjoy it, but it's taking away from the vision of what the director and or writer or producer or whatever had in mind. So I think there is a desire to defend the purity of the intention behind the experience that a lot of gamers are, they're protective of that, which I can seize. And I think if you start adding a bunch of sliders that let the game change just based on how you're feeling any given moment, I do think that begins to sort of, carve into the integrity of the product. So I understand what you're saying, and I think that works for some games, but I don't think that works for all games. Certainly not the Souls games.
I understand what you're saying, and I see your points, but and then my second little bit of a deviation from that point in terms of the relevant discussion you were having, in terms of the PlayStation games having more or less sales on PC.
Yeah.
Essentially, you can break it down to maybe the integrity of the individual PC game, because maybe Horizon Zero Dawn, when it was coming out, a lot of people were like, oh, this is an inferior PC port, not because it's, not a bad or good game, but because the qualities that have been carried over from console to PC, there have been some sort of weight there, and it's not so much of a seamless transition but something that takes a little bit of time to grow, and as the PlayStation PC LLC or what have you on Steam will grow, maybe you'll see more of the kinks worked out there. I'm not sure so much as the quality of the team on these PC ports as much as you are, maybe, but
yeah, I mean, I wonder about my understanding is the quality of the PC ports has been really fucking good. And like even God of War coming out in January, God of War 2018 on PC looks like it's going to be the very best version of God of War. So I don't think the reputation they're building is like substandard ports. I think they're building a reputation that says if you want to play the very best version of Death Stranding or Days Gone or God of War, the PC is where you go to get it. I mean, I think that's kind of what the consensus is. So I don't know if I would agree that it's that the ports aren't very good.
Well, it's not so much a universal issue. I was only bringing up the light of specifically Horizon Zero Dawn, which I was following because I'm interested in playing that myself, but what the initial release was saying that it wasn't up to par as much. But I guess as time has gone on, they've gotten more stronger and stronger releasing these type of games. And like you're saying, maybe people are going to view them as the superior, like potentially the definitive versions of these games.
Yeah,
and,
Darth Nugget in the chat is saying Horizon was kind of bad at launch. So maybe that, and if you look at the sales for these games, at least that this guy shared with us, they are going up. Each one sells about 150,000 more units. So maybe part of it is the reputation recovering from Horizon. I mean, I'm not going to buy the PC God of War, because I've played it. But I know if I was a hardcore God of War fan at this point, beyond just really enjoying the last one, I would get the PC version because it's got everything you want. It's the perfect version of the goddamn thing. But anyway, all right, Deathsaw, I appreciate the call, buddy. Thank you so much.
Yep, thanks for having me. Hello, chat, and goodbye, chat.
Anytime, buddy. All right, there goes Deathsaw into the evening. Definitely one of Death Stranding's bigger selling points on PC, says Diego, was that it was an amazing port. On the other hand, Horizon took a long time to get at the same level. Brian says Horizon was cleaned up, though, but it was a rough start. Gotcha. Okay. All right, fellas, that's it for the Gabbin' in the Games. I hope you had a good time. I sure as fuck did. Thank you for spending some time with me. New members, welcome. Super chats, thank you very much. I will be back maybe tonight playing Forza. If not, I will be videos tomorrow, and I'll be back with another live show on Wednesday. Rob the Mod, thank you so much for modding. All the calls, thank you guys. I like making noises. I don't have to tell you. I hope you're well. Be safe. I'll talk to you guys.